There.
Almost. Hey, there you go.
Stay on target.
Hey, alright. I think it's up. I think.
Hello.
It might be a little slow in terms
Looks like
of.
we're still sitting there.
I think this is from the start of ours on our side, so this will be like a good 10 seconds before it actually catches up to us, I think.
Gotcha.
Which is kind of terrible, but. Hey guys, 20 seconds behind the video stream. So use your precog abilities to ask questions.
In the future.
In the future.
Yeah.
Cool. I think the audios are fine. Try talking a little bit.
Yo, hello.
Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so it is 7:54, so we have a little bit of time right now. Wait, let me go back. Actually, we have a little bit of time, and while we're waiting, we can just talk with Arthur and wait for people to fill the chat and whatnot. See how everybody's doing. I'm gonna get some water actually.
That's a good idea.
I feel like my throat is
Yeah.
getting dry already.
Grab a backup drink.
Okay. I think we left, and then the stream is catching up to us.
Yeah. Unless we're invisible now.
We've always been invisible. Let me see if I can pull this down so that we can see ourselves a little bit better. Okay, so it is 7:56, so we have a little bit of time before we start getting into things. I think some of you guys have met Arthur already, just from Friends Day night.
Yeah. Joining in to play some video games pretty much every week, I guess.
Yeah.
At this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow.
For the last couple. Yeah. Yeah. I just love playing video games. What can I say? And talking shit about things that have gone wrong. That's pretty fun too.
Animation.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tuesdays. I think we've talked about it before. Just Tuesdays we usually do storyboard, but this time around, I figured we do a little bit more composition design stuff because I think at least a lot of the students that I see or people that are trying to break in storyboard, I think they could benefit from having a little bit more design principles in their work. That is something we talked about last week. How your drawing skills do play a factor in getting hired. Like
Right. Yeah. I mean, for boards, they're going to want to see that you're pretty competent with moving figures around in space. I'm not that great at that, but a board artist should be. Yeah. I mean, I feel like your fundamentals are always going to be super important. And, like, if you're a background designer or a prop designer, you're leaning towards maybe, like, just, designing shapes in space, making sure they work compositionally. But the board artist has to be good at doing that with people. And, a good board artist should really be able to do pretty decent backgrounds too, anyway, because you kind of want to start informing your designers a little bit, making sure you're picking good shots that your designers are going to be able to actually be able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super important. Being a good board artist means knowing the limitations of your design team too. So really, a good director is working with everyone, not just the board team. There's no invisible segregation there. we're all in it together.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the design principles that apply to on design side, like the art side, apply to storyboards. Like the rule of thirds applies to everything. Like it's not just breaking the frame into three; it's also designing things so that they're 1 to 1/3, the golden ratio, and like big, medium, small, layering things. So like all those things that we kind of don't, or people teach us in our class, but we never remember all the time, but we should.
Yeah. I can't think of the last time I intentionally thought of golden ratio. It's sort of like an intuitive thing at some point where it's just like, okay, I know that these shapes are sort of in my wheelhouse. Like you sort of have tricks that you keep in your back pocket at all time. At some point, they sort of start just becoming like your hand, like the hand that you draw with. So, yeah, I definitely have arrangements of shapes in particular sizes that it could be rocks or it could be trees, but I tend to like to group things in those ways because I know that it's going to have big, medium, small built into it. It's going to have three things. Having things in threes always looks good. Stuff that you'll get in a classroom and then probably put away and not think about. But if you can sort of internalize it and use it over and over again, then it'll just become habitual.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, what are all those things again?
So that's kind of that's the main idea of why I asked Arthur to help me out with this, because I think he's more versed in those rules and more versed in explaining them. Arthur has taught before. He's taught perspective, design. He's art director now. I don't know if he can.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it yet, but I'm gonna be art directing.
Yeah, he's a real pro. So, I think he would explain the concepts better than I do because I just have a very basic understanding of it, and I haven't really thought about how to explain them. So.
Yeah, I haven't taught in a minute either, but I feel like we can just go through it. I mean, I've been drawing backgrounds all day today, so some of it will just start coming out naturally. Because I didn't prepare anything for this, but if people have questions too, we can just start shooting back and forth, and I'm sure I'll have answers to questions about how do I fix this?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, post them up in the chat. Also follow Arthur at Arthur Loftis on Instagram.
Yeah, just my name on Instagram. No spaces. I'll change the overlay a little bit, guys. We're just talking because it's barely 8 o'clock, so I figure we just have a little chat, hang out, guys. We won't have to get too serious. We just came from our 9 to 5, and now we're doing 8 to 10. Yeah, I was at work today drawing. I was like, oh man, traffic's gonna be terrible going home. It wasn't too bad from Hollywood, but it's still 40 minutes. So yeah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, there was a fire recently in LA that went past one of the freeways we have to take, so it's always kind of busy now. But well, it is 8 o'clock, and you guys know what that means. That means joke time.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you don't know?
I don't know what this is.
It's a Lunch Lines book. It's all jokes.
Okay.
And I always start in the stream with a joke.
Okay.
They're great. Let me tell you.
I think I heard one through the door the other night.
Kevin says no pineapple today. I figure we just give you guys the back wall. These are all just art books of a bunch of stuff,
and there's more on the other side out of frame. We just have a lot of books.
I think this is just yours and Kirk's, right?
Yeah, the black shelves are mine, the white shelves are Kirk's. So, and then some of these are yours too, right?
No, mine are all in my room.
Oh crap! Yeah, it's just me and Kirk. Well, actually, Lynn's are mixed in with mine, but they're mostly mine.
That's a lot of art books.
Yeah. Just dump them all into your brain. Yeah.
I never feel bad about buying art books because you never know when you'll need it.
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot of times, so like it doesn't sound like it, but some art books go off print, so it's harder to find. And it's always good to have.
Yeah. I go back to them all the time, and like whenever I'm starting on a new project, I like looking through the library and Kirk stuff too, which is why it's nice having roommates who also have art books. And I just look for stuff that I know like is gonna sort of help inform whatever it is they want to do with the project.
Same. I do the same for storyboard books, but less so now just because I'm lazy.
Yeah, I get that way. It depends on the project too. It's like, oh, I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm gonna go look at the library. Or sometimes it's like, yeah, I really don't want to start. Gonna be like taking a break, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like Kylie Gay says, "Oh wow, how long have you been collecting?"
Collecting. Well, definitely. I graduated 2008, and I'd been taking art classes even before I went to college. So yeah, I guess at least a decade.
Damn.
But you know, I kind of curtailed it. There was like that time in college where I was buying books all the time, and I think when you start working after school too, you're still in like study mode, sort of, because you're just trying to continue improving as fast as you were in school. So I bought a lot of books during that time, and not as many now, but whenever you go to like Kino, or you know, we have like anime bookstores in LA and stuff, it's hard to resist the new stuff. It all looks really cool.
Yeah, there's a new Tanaka Nakamura animation book coming out, and then Susho has a book coming out in November.
Yeah, I saw the weird video.
I'm thinking about I pre-ordered the Sushio one, so that'll come, but I'm not sure about the Nakamura because it's so expensive. It's like $70 something for the Nakamura one. I was like, whatever.
Yeah, and I try to get like books from a variety of artists. Like I have a couple like favorite people that I just continue to buy all their shit. But for the most part, I'm looking to kind of spread things out. So I got a bunch of random stuff. And I mean, actually, as a background person, photography books help a lot too. Get like those National Geographic landscape books. It's just stuff that you could find something similar online, but having it all right there in your hand and just being able to flip through like a hand like crafted collection of awesome landscape photos goes a long way. Like it really, you can start turning the gears in your head a lot faster than you would just by Googling like, I don't know, like mountainscape or something. Like I need to draw mountains. Where would I start? Yeah,
I feel the same way.
Gives you what you put back in, basically. Yeah, books.
Wow, the chat is blowing up. Have you read all of those books? Says what a guy.
Well, they're like art books, so I flipped through all of them. Yeah, I've totally seen every photo in them at least once.
Rebecca says, would you consider yourself book smart, Arthur? Or, I guess it's book smart or street smart.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, I'd have to go with book smart.
What type of chunky are you?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'll get back to you.
Kevin said, worst place in the house for an earthquake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Wait, no, we have glass cases with toys in them. That would be worse.
I think you also put up you drilled into the wall, right? Or you have like the earthquake shelving?
Yeah, for some of them. These connect in the corner, so it's actually like kind of like a shape that's stuck back into the wall. But yeah, I don't know about Kirk's cases.
Well, you guys will see us if the stream goes down. Well, 911.
Yeah.
Chris says, process-wise, do you prefer working with line or in tone? Is there any advantages working? Okay, so these are,
Good question.
These are like design questions. Let's do the joke first, and then we'll dive right in, and I'll switch over the overlay to the Photoshop one, so you can see what he's drawing.
Okay.
So hold up on the.
I don't know, man.
I forget if I did this one already. There are a couple where I'm like, I think I. Here's a good one.
Okay.
What do you get when you cross a legendary water creature with a criminal?
Legendary water creature.
Legend.
Like a Loch Ness monster, but some sort of. What?
You get a Loch Ness mobster.
Man, this sucks. All right, let's start drawing.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, we're gonna switch over to the other stream, so you guys can see what he's drawing. This is not the latest version of Photoshop, so don't.
Oh yeah, which one are you using?
I'm using the one you gave me.
CS5.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if it's missing some stuff, my bad. But I don't really use Photoshop for anything too professional, so I don't really pay for it. So Chris says, process-wise, do you prefer working with line or in tone? Is there any advantages working one way compared to the other?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the show too. Like you end up sort of changing up your style to match the show you're on. I'm definitely more comfortable now doing line work first and then adding in tone afterwards. Certain shows like don't really seem to reward you for putting in tone in the first place because you're just trying to churn out work as quickly as possible. Especially if you're working on like, animated sitcoms type stuff, like you're just grinding through it. In general, I would say like TV animation anyway. I can't think of many shows that I was able to really start with tone and then add line in afterwards. But there are definitely shows that have a style that leans more towards that. I would still rough things out in line and then start building it up with tone. Like if you look at the Kevin Dart stuff, it's very tonal shape based.
Yeah.
And the line is almost like an accent that just helps keep the forms together. Personally, if I was working on a show like that, I would probably still work in line and then drop in the tone later. I've worked on some shows that are incredibly painterly, but I still started with line because there was finished line work in there, and it goes back and forth. Like Voltron was pretty painterly. I mean, you could almost paint those backgrounds and drop line on top later. But I would still if personally, I would just like to build it up with line, kind of go back and forth. Motor City was actually very tonal too.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like it's personal preference at some level, and then as long as you can get to the finish that the board requires, or the show requires, then, you can sort of do whatever you want. It just has to be organized properly. That's probably one of the biggest things that we run into as, like, production background designers versus, like, finding someone who's just really good at drawing on Instagram. If you hire someone who has no animation experience to do backgrounds, a lot of the time you'll find that their background organization in the layers is just a complete mess and basically like very difficult to use. Like you would almost have to go through and just combine things down, and it would be like a second person's job to fix a background that's not built properly.
Okay, so I guess two questions, just because I think most people don't know what background artists do. First one is like, how many backgrounds are you expected to do a week? And then second, how would the layers look like in a show, or if you're drawing a background for a show that would look professional compared to like a non-professional person?
Yeah.
Oh, here you can use the keyboard.
Oh yeah, sick. I can't do it without the keyboard.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm like, I need my hotkeys.
Yeah, it feels like my left hand is gone if I don't have the keyboard there. Am I in this?
Yeah. Or there's also the right click is the display toggle, so if you need to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you do it. Warm up a little bit. So basically, yeah, I would. Oh no, I was on a Mac all day. Yeah, if I were building stuff for like a TV show, hopefully you guys can see these layers over here. Like you would have your field guide on one layer, and this is just basically the frame that for the scene. That's where your camera stops. And so like if you were like putting together a background, hopefully like you would, and this is say your foreground area, that would be on a separate layer from the next layer over. And you can basically like move these, because hypothetically if they want to do like a parallax thing in post where they take these layers and move them so that you're like slowly moving into the scene and they're going to be moving them at different speeds and stuff, you want that stuff on separate layers. So when you like get a background back from like a freelancer or someone who maybe you haven't worked with before and it's like flat like that, you can't do anything with this now. Like the whole thing is a mess, and sometimes they'll even flatten it with the white underneath, so you can't paint into it without multiply mode either. Yeah, I've seen a lot of crazy shit. So yeah, the best way to do it, I would say, is and people will literally thank you for doing it correctly. Say this is your foreground, so you label that foreground, and then you go in here and you put a mask underneath for the painter, because they will thank you for that.
It's all the stock keyboard shortcuts.
Gotcha. Say that's your foreground, so that's your fill. You can put fill here. I don't know if anyone's going to care about that. And then you group these together. That's your foreground. And then here's your midground. Let's say it doesn't really matter too much. Foreground's just nice to have labeled. I don't know. I just like to label things as much as possible. And I've never had anyone say like, your files are too organized. Like you're confusing me with all the organization. So yeah, I would just put that like that, and then put this in a folder. And you know, it takes a couple minutes to do this as you go along. Hey,
hello.
And it really doesn't require you to do much except for to pay attention while you're drawing. And it helps out the people behind you so much that, I mean, yeah, you save them hours of work long term if you just do stuff like this. Are you in frame?
There she is.
Hello.
I'm showing them file organization. Everyone came here to learn how to...
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I'm just kidding. Like
this is your job too.
Yeah, it is my job too.
Graphic design is nothing but organizing this shit, and it's more complicated than animation backgrounds.
Yeah.
I just have to put these things in a folder. You have to like link smart objects.
Bruh, don't even get me started. My InDesign files. I'm gonna sit right here because I need to like learn this shit too.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so anyway, whatever you do, make sure this line layer is separate from the paint layer. Don't flatten that, because then no one can paint underneath. And the nice thing about Photoshop, if you don't know already, is you can click this little checker box thing on your fill layer, and now it's a lock transparent pixels layer. That's what this little lock on the side means. So, a painter can just go straight into this and paint into it.
I didn't know that was... Is that like a clipping mask? Is it the same as clipping mask? Or?
No, clipping mask is another layer, and then you hold down, or you can right click this, I guess, and can create clipping mask, and it'll clip it to the layer underneath it, which is basically the same thing, but you can have... There are so many ways to do the same exact thing in Photoshop. But yeah, you can hold down Alt in between the two layers, and it'll clip the one on top to the one beneath. So I do that a lot because it's slightly faster, but the normal way to do it is right-click the layer, create clipping mask. It'll clip to the layer beneath it, and now you can paint into this layer, and it'll preserve all that information separately. If you unclip it, you can see the whole layer, and then, yeah. So basically, you preserve this layer, and you don't need lock transparent pixels on for that. It'll just mask it to the layer underneath. But lock transparent pixels lets you do like an extra clipping mask where there's no extra layer. You're just painting directly into the already filled pixels of that layer. So, like, when I'm lazy, I just like to lock transparent pixels, and like you could throw a gradient on there, you could start painting into it. Generally, if I'm gonna do like a gradient and I just want it to fit to that layer, I'm lazy and I lock transparent pixels. But you could totally do the gradient in a separate clipping mask layer, and that way you can move the layer around too. Yeah, this is all technical Photoshop shit. It really, yeah. So.
Oh, sorry. So Aiden asks, are there cases where environments are designed before storyboards, or is it always storyboards first? And I think in the line, the other question that Kevin asked is, not to interrupt, but are there things that you get from board artists that are massive pain or something that might get bounced back that we should look out for?
Yeah, I'll go with the first one, I guess. Environments done. Oh wait, that was Aiden. Yeah, so it depends. Like, basically, there is a certain amount of back and forth, and I've been on shows where boards came first, and I've been on shows where design came first. And I would say even with shows where the boards came first, and you were basically just drawing backgrounds over completed animatic screen caps, the boards, they would still ask you to sort of rough out the basic layout and maybe a couple ideas for what you would like to do with the area. And there's some back and forth wiggle room. It kind of depends on the studio, but like, for example, if you know you have a scene that's going to take place in a house, they might ask you to draw a floor plan of the house, and you would read over the script with the director, and hopefully they would have a handout meeting with you first, and they would tell you, like, this is what's got to happen in here, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and you can kind of bounce it back and forth a little bit. It's sort of informal, but that's basically just to inform the board artist what the space looks like that they're going to be boarding within. So if you were working on a show that designed first and then boards came after, which I've also worked on, it's like that, except obviously design is more further along by the time the boards start. Actually, I guess you can't really do too much design without boards. It's more like, are you going to have boards come first, or are you going to have design and boards going at the same time? Because you can't really do all of the design without boards running.
Yeah, usually when storyboards get designs, we usually get designs for very specific things. Like if this is like going to be reused in the future, let's say we're doing the X-Men show, right? And they're going to use a danger room. The danger room is where they do all the fighting and stuff. They'll probably give the storyboard team the design first, as in, like, this is what we have in mind. It might be rough, it might be finished, but then from there, it's only going to be like 1 or 2 drawings at most, and then we'll board to that, and then Arthur and the rest of the design team will figure out the more nuanced stuff and kind of match what was already there, kind of match what the first design was. And so it really depends on the location and the props or whatever you're using, like the importance story-wise within the show.
Yeah. There's kind of like it's almost like 2 different kinds of pipelines entirely.
Yeah.
Because I guess like Turbo, you would basically have a handout meeting. As a director, you would have a handout meeting with your designers and sort of like go over what the space would look like. But then boards are gonna get going, and we're essentially handed like a finished animatic for the whole episode, and then we just take like the key locations from the boards and just design them out to match that scene. And that's like a very lean production, because you're basically like, okay, here's the shots, just get through them. And yeah, you don't really get much of a say because the animatic's done at that point. On the flip side, you can have design come in early or at the same time as boards, and sort of the designer would actually have more say at that point, because boards aren't done yet, which basically means like you can see early passes on what the board artists are doing and be like, okay, can we limit the amount of down shots or whatever, because this is going to be too intensive, or can we try to combine these 3 shots into one, so that instead of drawing 3 slightly different backgrounds, which happens a lot on shows that aren't looking out for that, you have one really nice background. So there's all kinds of things that are basically just designed to save time and money. And it sort of just depends on how the show is structured.
Did that answer you guys' question, or do you guys have any more questions about production, design, and storyboards? Otherwise, post them in the chat, and then I guess we'll start heading into the design side of things, maybe. Like,
sure, yeah.
Design principles. Yeah.
I guess that kind of answered Kevin's question too. Like, multiple shots that are slightly different from each other in the same area, that's like obviously a pain. And board artists, you're working so fast to try to get through the massive amount of work that board artists do that you're not always looking back and saying like, how can I reuse this shot that I did earlier? Like, you're thinking about acting and, you know, staging, not necessarily like background count.
Personally, I look at background count because I'm just like, I don't want to draw that again. So
honestly, that saves both of you time. So yeah, like, thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, as a board artist, you do everyone below you a favor by thinking of stuff like that, ways to reuse assets instead of just, you know, like, just being in the flow of it and being like, oh, this is looking great, this acting's great, like, and then the rest of it's someone else's problem.
Definitely, as a board artist, draw on your backgrounds, even if it's super, well, try to make it not so rough, but rough enough that people can tell what's happening. Chris says, for complex interiors, how do you keep track of scale? Is it common to use 3D blockouts to get more proper dimensions?
You could, I know She-Ra had like its fair share of like SketchUp models to help figure out stuff. I mean, certain shows are gonna have kind of a flatter look to them, so 3D isn't even necessary. On Voltron, we did use 3D from time to time, depending on how complicated it is, because basically someone's gonna have to allocate time to build out a 3D mock-up of the set. So you really want it to be, I don't know how familiar people in the chat are with Voltron, but there's like certain fights later on in the show that were like super epic. So we basically said like, we need to set up this area like a crazy stage for all these awesome action moments to happen. You know, people like coming down this slope and then fighting each other and falling off the edge of something and going down to another portion of it, and it was all very complicated. And so the 3D actually not only helped the designers because I had a SketchUp model to draw over, it helped the board artists immensely, and you can see just screenshots from the SketchUp model in the animatics because they were working hand in hand to create that set. So it really depends, but the main thing is, like, it needs to be a show that actually requires it. You don't want to spend time building out 3D stuff unless you need to do it, because that's time that you're not drawing a background. Good to know.
Yeah, that's a good point, Min-Maze, about BG stuff. Like, you don't... It's about being economical with your shots, being economical with your time. It just becomes a... I don't want to say late. You know that saying where a lazy programmer is a good programmer? Because it's not being lazy, it's just being smarter with everything. Time, your work, with the production, etc., etc. So
yeah, work hard, not smart. Work so hard that you die. That's what I always say. Don't even think about being smart. That's stupid.
Question from Kylie Gay. Sometimes you do see storyboards that have only grid, no backgrounds. Is it that the backgrounds haven't been decided yet, or is that a time the background has to figure it out? Background artist has to figure it out.
It kind of depends. I mean, if you were on the show, you would know why it is that they put no information in there. I've definitely worked off boards where it was like, there's basically just a horizon line because, like, it's like a crazy action scene. And you can always check in with the director, too, and be like, which direction are we facing here? But usually you'll see that because the area has been figured out to some degree already. Unless you're working on a show where design comes first, in which case you're probably going to figure out everything but where the horizon line is. So it just depends on the situation.
Personally, from a storyboard side, I think that's like the least you should be doing in terms of indicating background. Like if you are just drawing grids, that's like very, very minimal, and you should probably be doing a little bit more than that. I understand that artists who do that just because they run out of time, or just because maybe it's hard to figure out, but I feel like it's not that hard to draw background. And kind of like getting back to what we had talked about in a previous episode, backgrounds tell you a lot about a scene too. Like, I think people forget that backgrounds account for most of a shot most of the time, and there's a lot you can use compositionally, there's a lot you can do emotionally with the background, and you should be using those things in your storyboards.
Yeah, I mean, even just indicating the perspective of the back wall or whatever is back there is a compositional element. Like, it could just be ground plate and sky card, and just indicating the perspective of the sky and the clouds might help inform the shot and what's going on. So even in an action scene, I would say like having some cool looking clouds in the back, even if there's literally no landscape back there, is going to add something. So yeah, if you are the board artist and you're stopping at the grid, think about framing and staging and see if there's some little bit of storytelling you can eke out of that scene.
Yeah, I even, like you said with clouds, like I always use them to frame characters or like lead the eye somewhere, because why not? They're clouds, you can put them anywhere. Like, they take no time to draw. You just have them. Like, if this is the frame that we're looking at now with the screen, you can put like clouds up here and stuff and just have it block out things. Like, it forces your eye down to the center or wherever you want it. So, and like I said, clouds are just so simple to draw that you should just do it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, make sure you properly layer your cloud layer.
Oh yeah, actually, if you have this, if you have this here, then obviously this is still ground. So the clouds are actually behind that, even though I labeled that BG. So you can put your clouds up here and have them point to this building or whatever. Use your zigzags.
Yeah, let's talk about design a little bit, and like things that I guess, I don't know, it's like basic design principles that will help to give your shots, or to help, because the way I see shots is like kind of like how Tony Zhao talks about every frame of painting. If you study painting or any type of design, there's always like principles that you use to help lead the eye, etc., etc. Like, these are, like we had talked about earlier, way to group things. And I think as a storyboard artist, you need to know that it's not something you can just forget or not use.
Right.
And I think that maybe that would be a little bit useful to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of little tricks. I like using. I just lifted it from my buddy Kang, and he was taught by Will Weston. So if you can take a class with either of those guys, you'll learn a ton. But yeah, Kang always talks about using zigzags in your composition. So I mean, you can already see it here. Like this is a zigzag. Here, this is a zigzag. It's basically just you're creating an arrow that points to something, but there's sort of like I would say like a line speed. Depending on the shape, it'll take more time for your eye to travel to a point. So if you literally just drew a triangle pointing to something, this is pretty much the fastest way from A to B. Like this is where you're starting and this is where you're ending. It's a vector, so it's very quick. When you have a zigzag going through a space, it's basically a broken up arrow. So, and you'll notice there's kind of a perspective to it too, because the end of the zigzag is smaller than the beginning of it. So you're essentially creating a giant arrow pointing to this endpoint, which is the building. So I like using them all over the place. And I mean, you can build your composition out of gigantic zigzags, which I do all the time, but you can also take background elements, like smaller pieces of landscape, and sort of form them into zigzags. So, like if you say you had some trees cresting this hill, you have kind of like a up and down thing going here. And you can just do this multiple times by having smaller pieces sort of going back and forth. And I mean, you want to vary up your shapes and stuff too, but basically like creating these little opportunities to not only show the form going over. I wonder why this is a thick pen. Maybe I should reduce this. You're not only showing that overlap, which helps show that form is turning, but you're also using this as a compositional element to basically push your eye over and into the area that you want it to go. So yeah, that helps. What else? There are lots of ways to do it, but basically, like, as long as you've got shapes traveling towards your focal point, you can lead the eye in that way. And you can build these abstract shapes like a spiral or a zigzag out of whatever. Like, you can have a spirally sort of cloud shape up in the top. Oh, I see. It's the tilt.
You can also change the brush. I'm not sure which one that is, but there are
It's got like
a bunch of random ones.
It's got a nice charcoaly thing, but it might be too picky with my. Yeah. I'm kind of used to just drawing with a round circle. Actually, I'm gonna.
The other thing about these design principles is that you can use them for action as well. Like if you have someone running away, if they're just running a straight line going toward the horizon, that's very quick. But a lot of times you'll want to have things happen like in a zigzag or like in arcs. Like all motion, usually when you look at animation, when things move, it's always like in an arc. It's never just flat. Just because that's the way mechanics work most of the time for human bodies and most things. But you can use these same design principles of like zigzags and like spirals and things to lead the eye somewhere. And that's kind of how all these principles like work together. They don't just stay in one area. They bleed over into a lot of things, and they kind of inform your work as you start to do it more and more.
Yeah. Another thing is like having these repeating elements going backwards into space establishes scale. So, you have a big old tree in the foreground, you know that this tree must be big because it's huge in the frame, and then you just repeat that shape as it goes back into space. So you kind of establish a scale logic within the image so that by the time you show how small these trees are on the final distant shape, it's like, oh wow, that's actually like a giant box or giant building, because you know that trees are gigantic. It's a relatable scale indicator.
This is a question for the chat. What do we call it when we want our shots to be layered and deep? Post it up in the chat. Post up the answer.
Let's see. So yeah, you could use spirals too. I don't really know what I would do in this case, but it's essentially just using objects to create some sort of line of gesture. You're basically creating gesture, but instead of with muscles on a body, you're doing it with trees and stuff turning over form. So like one of the first exercises I used to do in my class, because Kang said it was a good first exercise, is you have people learn how to do wireframing, which is basic viscom stuff. You're just wrapping lines over a form. And this is like the first thing you learn when you go to art school, or at least a design art school, is like how to turn form with just lines. And then basically like once you can do that with a grid, you can take that and try establishing the same form emphasizing it by adding shapes onto it that are going to fit onto that grid. So, if you have cones or trees, the perspective on that circle is going to have to match the surface that it's attaching to. And then, obviously at some point you realize like, oh, you're just teaching me how to draw hills and show the form of the hill with another object intersecting it. So basically, all you really have is, 3 lines for a tree and this here, and you've already sort of started to establish the shape is turning over like that, and you don't need the grid anymore. You've already graduated from grids. You're better than the grid now. The grid is garbage.
He can see the code.
Yeah, show me.
And you guys are right. It's thick. That's why I always when I tell them make shots deep, I'm like, you gotta make it thick like a lasagna. You gotta
yeah.
We have to go deep on those. Like, you gotta layer things. Like,
oh god.
All my metaphors are food metaphors.
Oh.
So like, for like showing scale, it's like you probably want to. I was trying to think of a good metaphor for that, but
for scale.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you describe scale with food?
I have no idea.
I'll think about that one. But for layers, definitely lasagna. Definitely want to make it thick.
Let that one marinate for a while. Now, are you glad you're here?
I regret it.
Let's see, what else?
Grouping. I think this is something I talked about before when designing when drawing backgrounds as storyboard artists. I think it's very easy for people to just like put things symmetrically all the time, and I think understanding grouping and asymmetrical design is important.
Yeah, basically what I did here with the trees all being kind of isolated, it's not really ideal because now you've basically just got these random isolated spots of color, and if you were looking at this, each one of them has sort of become an island unto itself, and it's really distracting. So I would either like combine them somehow, or maybe add more trees to sort of bridge the gap and create like a larger shape that essentially has the same gesture to it. Like we're still creating like basically a triangle going in this direction to help us go over this hill, but we're doing it, with a collection of smaller shapes. So once you've gotten past this step of being able to make the trees sit on the hill, you're going to start turning them into groups. Basically like what I did here with these, a little better than the second group, where we're trying to organize them together into one collected piece. And so I kind of use this sort of 3-piece collection a lot, where it's like one big one small one that's kind of detached, and then like a medium that's attached to the big one. I don't know why I like this so much, but it does seem to get the job done. It's asymmetrical. You've got big, medium, small in it, and then it points in a direction. So I actually do that a lot for rocks and stuff. Like, say we have like a rocky landscape now, just like put a little guy there. It's a little guy.
Is that Dwayne The Rock Johnson?
Yeah, that's him. And now we've created a triangle. Now we've created a triangle pointing over the hill. Yeah, it kind of depends how you space them, but yeah. Actually, I guess it points. Well, yeah.
When would you not use grouping?
If you're trying to make something like a focal point. So basically, like, contrast is design language. So if you've got a group here and then one rock over here, this rock has suddenly been isolated, not just because it's literally by itself, but because every other rock in the scene is grouped with another one. So you're creating like a logic system that says like, okay, this is normalcy, right? Like everything else is going to be put together, and in some way, well, that's not looking good, but yeah, in some way. And then now we have one big one over here by itself, so there must be something important about it. And that's one trick, and really you want to stack those tricks. So I would not only make it
layer those tricks,
layer thick lasagna,
thick tricks.
Yeah, thick tricks. You can have that one, unless you were using it already.
No, I wasn't. That'll be in the lexicon now.
Okay.
Thick tricks.
I hate it.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I cut you off. I couldn't resist the alliteration plus like synonym. Thick trick.
Yeah. Well, so basically, it's already isolated. Make it a different shape. Make it a different value. There are all kinds of different things you can do to make it contrast against everything else in the scene that's going to make it stand out. You can, use a different shape language, like if it's the only like vertical thing, or even better, like if everything is really straight and up and down like this, then maybe this is the only curvy shape in the entire scene. Stuff like that.
So that's like stacking both grouping and isolation, and then it's like grouping, and then there's also contrasting shapes or shape language. That's like two tricks in one.
Yeah. You can take a similar shape and wrap it with organic shapes, and that'll already make it different too. Yeah.
Oh shit.
There's all kinds of stuff. It's kind of veiny, actually.
Oh god.
Those are supposed to be vines.
This is a PG.
Yeah, the show's for children. Those are vines.
Chris Na says, can you talk a bit about visual weight? How do you keep things balanced without resorting to having a symmetric composition? And then A says, came late, but hey everyone, looks like the usual crowd. Hey guys, thanks for coming by.
I really like symmetric composition is very specific, which is why you're not going to be using it too much. It's for really iconic stuff. I mean, as you already know, like if you're putting something dead center and everything is framing it, then it's super important, because this scene can't be about anything else. So with asymmetry, I mean, you're going to be using it a lot more, and I think it sort of becomes intuitive at some point. I don't think there's like a magical formula for visual balance. It's just like, this scene is unbalanced because I have a heavy group of trees here, and some of this comes down to tone, value, not just line. But I have a heavy group of trees here. I have looking at this one, I have a building in the back. Everything is on this side. So really what I need to do is find a way to balance it out. And it's that sort of visual problem solving that you'll just get accustomed to doing all the time, as you're not walking into a background or illustration, painting, whatever, knowing exactly what it's going to look like when it's done. You've created like a little balancing act for yourself. And as you add design elements that help tell the story, you need to make sure that those design elements are balancing out visually, or else you're going to have just a lopsided composition. But I don't think it's like, I mean, the thing is, you'll end up just noodling on this stuff for a while. That's part of the fun of it. It's a little it's a little game you play with yourself.
How did you develop that sense of, I guess, like knowing what needs to be balanced out? I think for a lot of people, design seems kind of magical just because there are these rules, but then the rules are always broken, or like, how do I know if it's balanced? There's like no formula per se, or how do I know if this asymmetry works, or how do you develop the eye for something that's good, I guess is my question.
Part of it is just looking at people who you really respect and seeing what they're doing right in their drawings, and sort of like, I mean, I was just doing this week. I was looking at stuff that I really like and basically going over it. I mean, there was just this really cool like landscape drawing that I was looking at, and it had like all these crazy rocks. I mean, it was super complicated. It had a super low horizon line, so it was like dramatic, slight upshot. I think there was like a waterfall somewhere in the back on like the 1/3 line, and like a bunch of shapes coming in from the left side, and then basically every tree down here sort of helped point the eye towards this little like interest point in the back. But there was other cool stuff going on. So one thing that like video game people have to worry about is creating multiple interest points. But in animation, the shot's only on the screen for a second, so you don't have time to do that. But basically, like, this guy was doing a vis-dev piece, so there was multiple cool areas going on, but the important one was like right here. And so I went over it and I just drew over it. And I was kind of laying out the rhythms that I liked, and just looking at the proportions that he was using and sort of just measuring it. And that was, I think, doing that enough, looking at, the old masters or whatever of animation backgrounds, just starts to build like a library in your head of like, oh, okay, like I can put the horizon line down here at like a 1:9 ratio, and I can put like a focal point somewhere over here on like the 1/3 line, and I'm gonna have a pretty dynamic, like cool low horizon line slide up shot that just looks epic because there's only this sliver of ground. There's like very little information in it. It's all like tiny overlaid sliver shapes, and then just this wall of awesome texture and shape and overlapping form. So the more you look at it and the more you're intentionally studying it and looking at what works, the easier it'll be to replicate it yourself. But
oh shit, I didn't know you did that.
What?
Like draw over, like, and then break things up, like by the ratios, I guess.
I don't know if everyone else is, but I was doing it just to help myself. I think there's like no perfect solution for any of these problems either. You just do what works for you. And as long as you're looking for solutions, like, they will show themselves to you. You just got to be actually looking for them.
That's actually super cool because I do something, and this is how I learned storyboarding, was I would copy shots on screen and basically do that. But I'm like, oh, this is like the same thing, but just for design. I'm like, oh, I should have been doing that. I'm so dumb.
Copying works for everything. You copy first, and then once you've sort of unintentionally picked it up just through, osmosis, hey, you're one of them now.
Yeah.
That was easy.
I feel like I say this a lot now recently. It's tough being dumb. And being able to learn things is important. So yeah, this is a good tip for me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back and like study like Edgar Payne stuff and like.
Yeah, Edgar Payne's awesome. You can copy those Marcus Mateo drawings from Framed Ink or any of his comic things or his vis-dev work, and it's all like just balls out crazy dynamic composition. I mean, it's designed as boards, but as backgrounds they're awesome too. Like, he can do everything.
Yeah, I'm really, I feel like sometimes I hit like a wall, not a wall, but I just feel like I'm getting in the same rut. And I'm like, okay, I need to switch things up. I need to make things like different because it's too easy just to do like 3/4 upshot, profile, 3/4, whatever's. So it's good to know that this is another way to do that, is just by like studying composition, be like, oh, this works really well.
Yeah. And I think, bouncing around from different styles and different kinds of filmmaking as you're doing that helps too, because they each have their own strengths, and some stuff's gonna be more like just very like cinematic. Some stuff's gonna be a little bit like flatter and more, I guess, character story oriented. There are all kinds of different shows out there, and they're all interesting to look at. You just gotta play to their strengths.
Yeah, like if you're gonna watch Michael Bay, better get ready to draw a lot of camera moves.
Yeah, a lot of rotating, a lot of overlapping elements and parallax. I mean, he makes chaos semi-legible, so that's actually kind of impressive. Yeah, Michael Bay's great.
I mean, I've talked about, I've actually, The Rock, I think I covered a little bit. There's like one conversation scene in The Rock where it's actually really smart. It's when they're in the prison and he's talking about like, how'd you get out of the prison, da, da, da. And like the way it's shot is still Bay-ish, but it's like smarter. Like whoever shot the scene was kind of conservative about their shot choices, and I was like, oh, this works. Like, good job.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good stuff hidden in there. It's just, he goes over the top after that, and it all just kind of falls apart.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. I guess I guess another important thing is like you can use like things lining up to draw attention to a spot. So like obviously like this waterfall is just pointing straight down towards something. So this would be a perfect place to like place something of relevance to the story. Like if you're gonna put like a log cabin down here, this waterfall is lined up with it, so you've created another vector that's pointing at it. But even if the waterfall didn't completely go down to it, having these shapes intersect on the same vertical is going to help create like a visual rhythm that points you towards it. And like the same thing is going on with the horizon line, which is the easiest thing to do compositionally to point towards something, is just set up a really clear defined horizon line, and then if your focal point rests on the horizon line, then you've already created a rhythm. And yeah, all these things can point to it, but you can sort of like, you know, eke out some extra visual rhythms going on in there. Like sometimes you'll see like a painting where they put a lake in front of something or some body of water, but there's like a light source in the you know, in the focal point. Oh, that doesn't really show up very well, but you know, this door is filled with blue neon light, and then you've like got the blue neon light reflecting on the water. That's another rhythm pointing up towards this. And sometimes they'll like go really crazy and have like a lens flare.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah, my J.J. Abrams that shit up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a compositional tool. They could have like some sort of light source here, and now you've got these three shapes in a row, so it's hard not to look at the door even more than you already were. It helps that it's symmetrical, but yeah, all these things go a long way to reinforcing a focal point, and that's basically what the background's designed to do. You're doing two jobs. You're staging a focal point area like for your characters to act in. Like presumably, if you had a character in that symmetrical building shot, they would be in the doorway or at least very close to the doorway, because this doorway is super important now. You can create all kinds of visual noise, texture, depth outside of that, and it's going to act as negative space, so this will basically all like sort of fall to the back. It could be crazy busy, but if it's busy enough to where that texture just becomes sort of like a flat noise, then this area is essentially like a non-space. It's negative space that's allowing you to focus on what's actually important, which is the building and the character in front of the building.
That's why design is important for storyboards.
Yep.
Because it helps you focus. It helps you know how to lead your eye to what's important. Like you said, the person in the doorway, or the cabin. Like, this is important to know so that when you're composing shots, you know how to focus people to a certain spot.
Yeah. Backgrounds matter.
Backgrounds matter, yeah. Do you want to look at some Spiderverse stuff?
Oh, yeah.
We can talk about that.
Sure.
Let me see. Pass me the keyboard. I had some screenshots I took from when I was reviewing it. If you guys have any questions for Arthur about design or anything, please post them in the chat. Oh shit. Let me see. Was it 11? Oh, where did I put all this stuff down? Oh no. Oh no. Oh my god. I had like a whole... It's in the flash drive. Oh, maybe it's in here. Fudge monkeys. Where did I put all... 13 clips? Okay. While he's asking, while I'm looking for this, he says, Caleb Carr says, tips for dealing with feeling overwhelmed by drawing an environment. Sometimes the sheer complexity of a scene can be a lot to deal with.
I would say start simple. I mean, yeah. Foreground, midground, background is probably enough layering to create a really dynamic background. In fact, adding more to that usually just muddles the idea of the shot. So if you just separate the depth of the shot into those three big, I would say do everything in threes as much as you can. Think of it as three planes, like, you know how they used to shoot cells where it's like a sheet of glass and it would just go back and you'd have a camera shoot it overlapping that way. Just treat your background as three sheets of glass with overlapping simple forms, and then treat it like figure drawing, where you're essentially starting with the simplest gesture of what you want those areas to be, and then you can slowly start to cut away into it and sculpt it a little more to be a little more realistic. But as you're doing that, make sure that you're thinking about what the background is trying to do, and that's always going to be like about the focal point. So think about either it's for a animated thing where there's going to be a character standing there, so you want to create sort of like an empty staging area. Think of it like a theater production. There's going to be some empty area in the middle that all the detail is around, that's designed for your characters to go in. So create that staging area in your background, and you can even sketch them in if you want, if it helps you develop the image. And then everything else in the scene is kind of a supporting cast for your staging area that's giving it visual depth, giving it flavor. You can put in cues to the history or the culture of the area. I mean, do research if you're trying to do something specific, and you should be trying to do something specific every time. Gather as much research as you can, go online, Google. I mean, I would say if you're doing it for yourself as like a student, try to pick something really specific, maybe even an existing story. Like, I know at Art Center, they take like an existing folktale or something like that, and basically just say like, what if it happened in a different time period or a different country? And you take those story beats and you basically illustrate them to match that specific, time and place. So that's something you could totally do for yourself. Just pick a crazy story moment and from a classic story and put it into a new context, and research the hell out of the area that you're aiming for so that you're making informed design decisions. But those design choices are all compositional elements that are basically puzzle pieces within the frame that allow the eye to travel to the story beat.
Just like a good lasagna, you want to start with the basics and then build on top of that.
Yeah, delicious lasagna.
Thick tricks.
Thick tricks. I did that. Now it's here.
Aphrodite asks, in a storyboarder's role, then do they sort of dictate which backgrounds will be made?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, you are following the storyboard or director and storyboard team's lead. If they ask for a ridiculously time-consuming, massive downshot of a whole city, and the boards are like set, there's no way that they're gonna take that back, then yeah, you're drawing a fucking big ass downshot. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it at that point. That's your job. Yeah, no problem, Caleb.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
I mean, honestly, that is for me one of the most like fun things, because it's a portfolio piece. It's just like, oh yeah, time to like stretch my muscles. But it also depends on how much time you have in the production. We're always slave to the budget. So if they're expecting you to get a certain number of backgrounds done each week, and then they drop an A-bomb on you, then it's like, oh well, I guess I'll do the other 4 on top of what I was going to do next week. So yeah, it tends to average out. If once you're in-house at an animation studio, they try to spread out the money shots, but they are money. They're called money shots for a reason. They cost time and money to make really cool looking stuff. That's why most of the time we're trying to look for ways to cut down on backbreaking labor or reuse backgrounds in an intelligent way so that we can make the most out of the time that we've spent.
Copy paste.
Copy paste. Use every trick. Don't draw every blade of grass from scratch if you don't have to. If your art director yells at you because you didn't, then, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. But I think Control F in Photoshop is normally last filter.
Really?
I changed it to flip object 180 degrees horizontally because I'm constantly taking shit I've already drawn, flipping it, scaling it up or down a little bit, and sticking it behind the other one so that it just looks like, oh, I drew two of them now. I mean, like, really, use every shortcut you can and then modify it slightly. Or don't, and see if you can get away with it. But, yeah, time is money. And LA's so expensive.
That is a really good tip from a designer.
From a TV budget designer.
Because before learning how other production people work, just in general, like, I was like, oh, I have to paint out everything and, like, grade out things by hand so it looks natural. And then I find out, like, the best people are just like, nah, dog, just use a gradient, use some filters, use whatever you need to. If you need to, like, copy paste something, take things from other paintings you've done, put them in. I'm like, oh, you guys are all cheaters. But it's not cheating. It's smarting.
Yeah. Work smart and then work hard. Because there's no way around it. You're going to work hard. I mean, yeah. There's probably some other tricks like that I'm not thinking of this second. I guess I don't do this, but you could do this. If there is like a texture that you need to fill an area with and it's like a repeating texture, you can create a smart object and paint it once and duplicate it into a grid. And then if you have to go back and change the texture later, you can just repair one of them by clicking into the smart object and saving it. And it'll batch apply it to every instance of the smart object in a file.
So like buildings or something?
Yeah, buildings. I would probably use it for like a texture on a floor, I guess. But the thing is, like, it gets very busy when you're batch applying a texture like that. So, you know, use with discretion. You'll know when it's getting too noisy.
Okay, so I actually found the backgrounds and stuff that I cut for when I was talking about it. I guess you can just go through the folders. I kind of group them by whatever's, but if you want to go through them and then talk about like compositional things or
Sure, yeah.
maybe just move this off to the side actually.
Oh wait, I can probably just click on it, right?
Yeah, you can click on it. I mean, you're going to need the keyboard for drawing and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
Hold on a second. Let me just make sure the framing's right. All right. All good. We're back in.
There we go. Sick.
And there should be a good variety of like backgrounds, just shots, normal shots, etc., etc.
Yeah. Let's see if we can find one that's more environment. I mean, this one's cool. It's got like these vertical gated shapes, and it's very symmetrical, so it's kind of creating like this imposing, like, organizational repetition can make things more imposing and sort of like create a space that feels like kind of rigid and strict. So, you know, you put that against something more chaotic looking and you can pull some contrast there. Yeah, actually we could look at like some of the concept paintings. I mean, I like all this stuff because I'm a Mialgo fanboy. And I just like the way he stylizes Maybe I'll just pull
there's stuff in the folders too. If you
Oh,
wanna
cool.
look through them as well.
Scale. Let's play with scale. Let's see.
Yeah, the one thing I loved about this movie was that things get really, really small, and things get really, really big. Like, just in this one alone, you can just barely see them on top of the reactor, and you're like, holy shit, that's ginormous.
Yeah, this is an awesome trick with the lighting where you're basically seeing what's going on, even though, they're so tiny up there. So you get both the scale and the action at the same time. Yeah, you don't often get to see really cool scale like this in a movie. I mean, I guess a big way to play with scale is stuff that we were already talking about, having stuff moving backwards into space that, like, each of these windows is basically giving you a cue as to how big a person would be in that space. And because they're moving backwards in perspective, now we know exactly how massive these buildings are, because it's repeating shapes moving backwards to the point that they're becoming noise and texture. And noise and texture can actually be a cool scale cue, too.
Someone asked a question, actually.
In animation, what parts of the pipeline would a vis-dev artist be a part of? So it kind of depends. Like, traditionally, vis-dev is a feature position, which is sort of like visual development means that you're developing the look of the movie. So you're painting characters, you're painting environments and props, and movies are all 3D now, so you're basically creating 2D art to help inform the direction of the movie. But someone else is going to take that basically concept art and turn it into 3D models later on. And a lot of vis-dev artists know some 3D too, so they can sort of start creating like rough approximations of what is ultimately going to be used in the movie too, or even like not just for props but for sets too. Vis-dev is also a title in TV now, but I think it means something different. I think it's supposed to be the same thing. You're basically developing the look of a TV show before it rolls into full production. And production backgrounds are different from vis-dev backgrounds. Vis-dev backgrounds are trying to not only explore, the style and, I guess, whatever the history of the location as much as possible, but they're trying to explain it as much as they can too, so you might cover more information than you would in a production background, which production background layout is basically like, I just need this shot to work for the story, so I don't need to see everything, and in fact, half of it can be in shadow if that's what the story demands. It's just that, it's very different. It's kind of like you're doing many more paintings than you would as a vis-dev artist, but the paintings are what's going up on screen. Now, vis-dev is almost like concept art for video games.
So you would say that production backgrounds is more like cooking the meal and make it multiple times versus like vis-dev, which is more like perfecting the recipe.
Yeah, it's like the behind-the-scenes cooking that the chef does to figure out what they want to add to the menu.
How to make that lasagna really sing.
Yeah, it's going to be so good.
Mamma mia.
Yeah, can't wait. What are these?
Just like, they did like a lot of down shots, really, really flat down shots that I thought were cool.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, man, this movie is like, every type of shot that they use in this movie, I would want to use in a show, but I feel like with a lot of it, it's just style, and we can't put that type of style in a lot of things.
Yeah, and some of this, I mean, some of these shots are awesome, but like I think about like TV budget, and I'm like, oh man, this would kill someone.
Yeah.
But compositionally, it's really cool. Obviously, you've got like the shape of the light coming down the street is creating a massive, like, basically like a vector cutting across the entire image, and it's this area of the street traffic is creating one kind of textured noise, and then the buildings are creating another. And on top of that, there's the value difference of the buildings being dark and the street being light. So essentially, him being a spot of dark on top of this, the only light space in the scene, is framing him. It's basically stage lighting, like in a theater production. Everything off to the side is going to be dark, and then everything where the characters are standing and acting is going to be light. So you can actually see that in a lot of these. Like this shot, it's pretty theatrical. It's basically like there's a pop of blue light, and just a general, like, the amount of lightness in the scene is very much centered on where the character is. And then, yeah, this scene, same exact thing. You've literally got a light source hitting one of the characters, and then the other one is being hit by it, and pretty much everything else is a lower, darker value. So lighting is a compositional element too. You're starting with line, and then you're using the line and the tone to create opportunities to point your eye towards those characters.
I don't think we use light enough in TV animation, to be honest. I think a lot of times people overlook it, and I feel like that's the thing that will give you the most mileage out of everything. Like, composition, I think, will play a big part, but I think lighting is second. Like, you can get a lot out of just how you light the characters. I think the problem with TV animation is that we don't always have the budget for that.
Yeah. Not that I know everything about running that, but to me, I think it is a budget thing where basically, like, you have special lighting scenarios for scenes that call for it, but most of the time you've either got like a light version of your character where they're just standing in light, or you've got a dark version where it's either nighttime, or you might have like a nighttime and a shade, standing in the shade version. And yeah, ideally you've got a background with stage lighting where you can have them standing directly in the pool of light. There's some darkness behind them, and so the lit character standing in the pool of light but with darkness behind them is going to pop light on dark. Or you can have a character that's in shadow and there's like some sort of dim ambient light going on in the background. Like I don't know if one of these scenes has it, but you see it a lot. Like, there will be some sort of soft lightness in the background that's essentially like backlighting the characters, so they'll pop dark on light. It won't always work if the show doesn't have the money to make that happen, because sometimes you're just painting backgrounds for high reuse instead of specific lighting conditions. But ideally, you're finding those opportunities as much as possible.
Yeah, like I like to use windows and like street lamps if they're outside a lot of times to frame characters, just because you can add those light sources are always going to be weird but artificial, so you can kind of cheat it a little bit, being like, oh yeah, of course the window behind them would be slightly brighter or slightly darker, so you can, like you say, you frame the characters.
Exactly.
Aphrodite says, or asks, how are TV animation compositions boards not as able to use such stylized shots?
So, Addie, it's not that you can't use those shots, it's just that you have to be very selective about when you're going to do it. Because, I mean, any of these down shots, you could have someone draw this and it wouldn't kill them, except for this city one at the end. This is a lot of information to have to draw by hand and then have someone go in and paint. Like, that might end up being like one guy's week to draw it and another guy's week to paint it, and then you've just blown, I don't know how many thousands of dollars that is on a single background.
I think that background was only on for like a couple seconds at best.
Yeah, it just follows him down. There's some camera shake and then it's over, right? Like, because that's feature animation. The problem with these backgrounds isn't just that they take time. Like, this would be fine. The problem is that this only works for this one scene. There is nothing else you can do with this other than have someone lying down in this bed and showing them in this position. They could be sitting up, but then now you're seeing the top of their head, so you're really not getting any information about what the character is doing or looking at. You could set up maybe a montage or something where they're doing multiple things within this framework, and for some reason the down shot helps facilitate the storytelling of that moment. But odds are you're never going to do that again after that episode. So as far as reuse goes, reuse is really important for TV, because we don't have money, man. I think on Turbo we were doing 11-minute episodes, and the background count was like 40.
Whoa.
Which is high for an 11-minute show. And yeah, I mean, if you can only use 40 backgrounds in 11 minutes, you want to make sure that you get your money's worth out of each one of those. So being artsy is nice, but you won't always have the budget to do it, which is why you really have to make sure that it is the juiciest story, character-driven, acting-driven, like perfect moment to do that artsy one-off shot. You don't just say like, I just want a big down shot because why not? Because that's money that you're not getting back.
Yeah, I think the thing you need to realize about TV animation is that because not everything is done in the studio and some of it is shipped overseas, anytime there is... So like, let's say Miles Morales, right? There's a daytime color for him. So you have a color stylist that colors the day colors for him, which might be like blue, red. But if he goes into nighttime, there's a separate color palette for that you have to do. And then there's a separate color palette if like a light hits him. Like let's say he's underground and that blue light hits him. That means you have to give us a blue color palette for that too. And so all these things, every time the lighting changes, you have to give a new color palette for overseas to deal with. And that's part of like why it's hard to do lighting. Also, you have to animate light. I think that's what people forget about 2D animation is that you actually have to animate the light hitting them. So like if you're turning a face, just turning a face is hard. But if you have a face turning in lighting, you have to design those shadows hitting the face as it goes across it. And that's not easy to do on a TV budget. So,
yeah, I mean, that's basically drawing like another drawing on top of the character for each frame. And I mean, overseas, they're still drawing it on paper. There's no like shortcut over there. Over here, there's some little After Effects tricks, but nothing is going to be the same as literally drawing the shadow pattern on the body. So, yeah.
Didn't that happen on Voltron?
Where
the
light pass?
Yeah, like where their dashboard is...
Yeah, we had a Voltron episode where I think it was like season 2 or something, where basically like their lions are kind of like in low power mode or something, and there's like a red ambient light hitting the characters in every shot.
Oh my god.
And I heard it basically like killed the outsourced studio. They were like, dude, this is crazy. Like, please don't ever do this again.
Yeah, there was a couple shots in She-Ra that I wanted to do that I was like, man, this would be so cool. And like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, just do it this way. But I think it was just a little bit tough for the studios to hit. And so I think we kind of toned it down. But yeah, lighting's never going to be easy for TV animation, which kind of sucks. Because I think someone told me about this about photography. Photography is 80% lighting and whatever else the other 20%, maybe like 5% Instagramming, whatever.
Yeah, I do think it is sort of like having a limited palette in painting. Like you just assume that 90% of the time you're stuck with like your flat color options with a shadow pass, and then like if you want crazy special lighting, it's gonna cost you. So you just use it when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Hey, senpai.
That's me.
Christopher asks, how do a lot of these restrictions change with 3D productions? And then Afro Addy says, oh, so being strategic or economical is a bigger part of the choices for TV.
Yeah, so yeah, you just have to be more economical with the TV budget because you're creating more content. Like the fact that Game of Thrones looks as good as it does is ridiculous because there is so much of it. Like it looks like a movie most of the time, but you get hour-long episodes and there's like 8 of them or whatever per season. Yeah, Game of Thrones is crazy.
For 3D productions, it is about lighting too, because the lighting takes time to render, and then it's also about it's more about shot count and camera moves versus 2D, where 2D you can kind of get away with a high shot count, but because 3D requires rendering, it's the rendering that takes a long time. and that's where a lot of the pipeline choking is in the rendering and the complexity of the shots.
Right, yeah. 3D is traditionally way more expensive to make than 2D. You need way better computers because 2D is drawn on paper. 3D you need a render farm. So just from the baseline, before you've even done anything, you need more equipment to make 3D.
Yeah.
There's more steps in it because you're building and rigging 3D assets to move around, and then you're dealing with like lighting systems that, instead of being like artistically handled by someone drawing and then painting it in, is being like rendered. So there's just a lot more to it. There's more jobs involved in the pipeline, and yeah, which is why, like, I mean, I guess people think of 3D as like easy somehow because, oh, the computer just projects a light onto the character, like it does it itself. But yeah, it's so expensive to build those characters and to rig those characters and to build those sets.
Yeah.
Those sets are expensive. In 2D, on Voltron, we went to a new planet every episode. You can't go to a new planet every episode in 3D. It's hard enough to go to a new city every season in a 3D show. I mean, even that's crazy. Like, typically a 3D show, you got the same headquarters, like home base, throughout the entire show. It's like Seinfeld, basically. You don't want to throw away that precious set that you've spent all that money on, because it took a lot of people a lot of time to not only build that, but fill it with assets.
That's the other thing about 3D, is that there are specific jobs just for lighting, because you have to place the cameras in the it's basically live action but in a computer. Like, everything has to be made, which is why I think 3D isn't always the best choice for like fantastical shows, because you don't have that freedom to just create new shit all the time.
Yeah, there are some pretty hard limitations to it, whereas 2D, I feel like the limitations are basically like, how fast can people draw? Yeah, and we find those limits.
Yeah, we find them pretty fast.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about 3D from a storyboard perspective is that you get the freedom to move the camera more, but you have to be very specific about your shots, because like in 2D you can shoot to the horizon where you don't see things because you can just draw a background, you put a background in, whatever. In 3D you can't always do that. You kind of have to, you can't have things go to infinity because you can't render that way. They'll have to like put a matte painting in back of it, so that's another job on top of that. Like, they'll build a set, but at some point they have to put a background in, so you have to be careful about the way you layer things in 3D as well. Mm-hmm. And that's just show to show. It's like a very specific thing, but yeah, it's kind of just to answer your question about 3D productions. Yay!
Yeah. Oh god, I love it so much. I've actually only worked on one 3D show, but I feel lucky. I don't think I enjoyed it that much.
I mean, okay, so on Down Trucks was a 3D production, and it looked amazing. I think it's because it started off as a feature and then went to TV. Yeah. So a lot of the characters were already built, and so if you pay attention, like, a lot of it moves. Like, there's a lot of secondary animation that just happens. I'm like, holy shit. But I think a lot of the backgrounds had to be like built by people on our team because we didn't have the budget for. Like, oh wow! I don't know. Don't quote me on it. That's just hearsay. You know, this is probably proprietary. Anyways,
let's not say any more about it.
It's 3D is a lot harder for you can't cheat as many things in 3D because it has to be made, and that's the biggest limitation, I think.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot with 2D. I mean, you can essentially, like, when you're painting a painting, you don't necessarily paint every building in the shot. Like, if you were doing like a gloomy nighttime shot, you could just indicate where a building might be, or just paint a couple in, and as it goes back into the shadows, like, it's just sort of implied that, yeah, there's a shit ton of buildings back there. So if you're using lighting to your advantage, composition to your advantage, there are a lot of tricks you can pull with a straight up painting that you just can't really do with a 3D set because it all has to be there so that they can move the camera through it and light it however they want. So there's no room for like, we're not going to actually go there later. Which is why they have to make the most out of those sets.
Yeah. A says, just wondering, was the budget for Troll Hunters higher than usual for TV animation? Yes, it was a lot higher, and it's because it came with Guillermo.
Yeah.
It's not typical for that to be the case. I think even when I was working on it, I was like, holy shit, this is so much money. Like, the footage that would come back, just in the roughs, I was like, damn, this is too good. Like, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it shows crazy good looking. It's basically like feature, but for TV.
They spent a lot of time, I think, making sure that everything looked good. Like, there was I think the vis-dev side was really strong, but I think also on the post side, they made sure things were lit properly, and it shows, like, but again, like, those type of shows don't come along very often because it's too much money. It just costs too much, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think if his name wasn't attached to it, there's no way that show would exist in its form. And yeah, you just see that sometimes. It's like, whoa, this is crazy good. What happened? And it's like, oh, yeah, this awesome dude came over, so they decided to throw everything at it, and that's always cool to see.
Ironically, I think the higher quality shows tend to stay around longer, even though this is just like speculation on my part, is like the shows that look really good tend to have a bigger following and tend to have more replayability. So like Troll Hunters, Korra, Avatar, Steven Universe, I think even like except for Motor City.
I'm out of here.
No. But yeah, I think quality plays a big part about TV animation. I just wish there was more of, like, I feel like Samurai Jack was a crazy well-designed show, and I think people love it for that reason. Like, cheap shows don't have that same feeling usually. They tend to disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think even if you don't know what you're looking for, subconsciously something in it's gonna resonate with you when it's designed well and looks really good. I mean, unless the writing is god awful, that usually can really like draw someone in.
Yeah.
But there's always gonna be the politics of like, we gotta cash in on this idea that's really hot right now or whatever, and that's business. At the end of the day, it's a business. You're an artist working for a business, so there's gonna be sacrifices, lots of them.
Yeah, there's gonna be, I mean, not everything can be like a AAA title video game, or not everything can be a 7-layer deep lasagna. Sometimes you have to stop at 4 layers is not bad. Noodle, meat, noodle, cheese, it's okay.
Sometimes it's nice to see something that, even though it doesn't have the highest budget, it's very lean, and you can tell they used what money they had very well.
Yeah.
And typically, like, it's just, I mean, all the Trigger stuff is kind of like that. That studio has no money. But somehow they managed to put out some, like, really good-looking stuff. Writing's not always there, but, I mean, it always looks amazing. And it's just like, how do you do it? Why do you do it?
Why?
Please watch Premiere. Please watch Premiere. September 17 and September 19. September 17 for dubbed and September 19 for subtitled. This is sponsored by Good Smile. Not really.
Premiere's a nice bowl of spaghetti. Yeah.
Do you guys have? It's 9:30. Well, it's not another half hour. Do you guys have any questions? Otherwise, we can talk about Otherwise, we can talk about the animation budget, or not budget, animation.
Oh shit, one track mind.
Guild pay, because Minmaze had asked about that earlier. She was talking about the wage, how to read the wage survey, and I can go over that. You guys don't have to sit through that if you don't want.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, I'm down for that. Although I don't know if you're gonna care. You're basically talking about the chart that shows all of our wages.
I think so. Minmaze, correct me if I'm wrong or clarify. Like, you want to know how to read that and how to understand how much to get paid. And we can, of course, if you guys have questions about design or storyboards or anything, just put them in the chat. We'll answer them as we go along. But I feel like you've covered quite a bit already, and I think these are, for me at least, these are the same rules I use in my storyboard, like leading the eye, grouping things, scale, and if you can get those things down, you can just start to get more and more complex with your lasagna.
Yeah, there's plenty more where that came from. I would say just like pick up framed ink, because framed ink is awesome. Bill Perkins' class helped me. Honestly, like, between Kang's class, Kang Lei, and Will Weston, I think that was probably everything I needed for composition. They're just, like, so succinct, and when you bring in your assignments, they will show you how to push it, too. I don't know where they're teaching these days. Like, I took Will's class in 2008 at the Animation Guild School.
I did too.
Yeah, for like $60. It's like the best $60 I ever spent. And Kang, obviously, super good too. Basically taught me everything. So, yeah, those guys are solid. If you can't come to LA and take a class, framed ink is... Well, even if you can, you should buy framed ink. It just has... a shit ton of really good information in it, and it's a relatively quick read considering the depth. I mean, he goes into focal lengths.
Yeah.
He kind of covers all the bases in sort of like a James Gurney-ish type, like, here's this situation, and it's just like a Rolodex of cool ideas. But every page is a gem. So that one's totally worth picking up.
A says, waiting for Will Weston to release some type of online lecture or lesson. He said he's planning on doing something. If anything, just follow his Instagram for now. He posts a lot of student work, and a lot of times it'll cover what he's talking in class. I took Will Weston's class, the design one. Derek Colesville was in that class, actually.
Oh, crazy.
This was before I knew him. I think this is after he graduated from arts. Anyways, it's...
Rad Seacrest was in my Will Weston.
No way!
It was him and Jason Shire sitting across from me, and I was like, who are these assholes? And they're great. They're not assholes.
Rad was in my figure drawing class with me. I was taking Kevin Chen's figure drawing. It's like, whoa, this is crazy.
Oh, crazy, yeah. He actually went to Watts down in Encinitas, too. That guy took a lot of classes. That's probably why he's so good.
Yeah. So yeah, pick up framed ink. Pick up. I guess
there's the Edgar Payne book.
Oh yeah.
It has like some general. It's not for animation. It's a landscape painting book, but it has some general framework ideas for composition. But honestly, like, I use the Edgar Payne book in my composition class, and like the main thing that it always boils down to is like you can basically like pick a focal point, and then you can have lines radiating off of it, and these can turn into zigzags and stuff, but essentially like pointing towards stuff will help sell your framing, your story point, and then basically like shapes towards the edge. This is the other thing he does. These can sort of like keep your eye from escaping the painting. So those are like the two most basic compositional tools. It's just like you'll always see in vis-dev painting like a foreground element down here. This is just to lead your eye back away, because these corners are essentially arrows themselves. Each one of these is a shape that could potentially lead you out of the frame. So just smooth out that corner with another shape, and it'll not only create like a little scale depth cue in the foreground, but it'll keep you from going out and kind of lead you around back in. And then you can put something in the background that kind of like harnesses that momentum. It's all about gesture. You're just creating gestures to bring you back into the focal point and kind of like, yeah, vignetting, exactly. Creating a stage.
Let me grab those books. I actually have both of them.
Okay, yeah. They're probably here. Oh, wait, composition of outdoor painting. Oh, wait, I have it.
Oh, yeah, both of them
Yeah.
on the shelf?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the exact same one I have.
Yep. They're both good.
Wow, look at that. Just right there.
Yeah. Everyone should have a library.
So this is the Edgar Payne one. He's one of the best American landscape painters. He did a lot of painted the Sierras. He painted a bunch of other stuff, so check that out. And then this is the framed ink book. He used to work at DreamWorks as a storyboard artist, but his stuff is amazing. Just like, boop. We'll do a little Parka blog right now, if you guys know what I'm talking about. But yeah, there's a lot between these two books. You'll probably be set in terms of composition. Afro Audi says animation really don't stop. You really don't stop learning once you're a professional, huh? How nice. It's
Some people do. I think it's a choice you make, and like you're better off continuing to learn because no industry stands still.
Yeah.
Like animation's not different from engineering or anything else. The technology's always changing. I always tell people this, like my first job in animation in 2008 or 9 was still on paper.
mine too.
Yeah, and that was the last time. But all the guys I was working with had to adapt after that. And my first design job in animation was to replace a guy that I had been doing cleanup for 2 years before. So, yeah, like everything is constantly changing. I mean, even Photoshop keeps updating even though I don't want it to. So, yeah, you really gotta keep on top of it. But it's fun because it's a community and you're all learning together. You never really leave school. School follows you.
You are the school.
Yeah.
I think people think of animation. I think the way to think about animation as like a job is not as a job, but it's a skill, and you have to constantly be developing this skill because we are skilled labor. We're not just workers. We provide a quality skill, and that's what allows us to command such a high price in paying us, right? Like if you were to ask people if you were to just take a random poll of people on the street, like, can you design a background? A lot of people would say yes, and then they do it, and they're like, that's terrible. Just drawing alone is a pretty high bar of a skill already, and then to do it well is an even higher bar, and then to keep developing that skill only reinforces why you should be paid the amount that you're paid and why you should continue to be in the industry. If you don't keep up your skills, then newer people who rise up can easily take what you're doing away, right? Like you need to develop those skills not only because it's a personal thing, but also because that is technically your job. You are skilled labor.
Yeah. Yeah, being able to draw is surprisingly rare in the entertainment industry. A lot of like concept art type live action jobs, you don't actually see much drawing in their painting. It's a lot of like, I mean, when you're painting, you're still drawing, but it's less draftsmanship based and more about creating mood by rearranging shapes. And there's a lot of photo involved. So calligraphy doesn't play as big of a role as it could. Whereas in animation, your hand calligraphy is your livelihood in a lot of ways. And you're just using that as a tool to help tell stories. So yeah, being able to draw goes a long way in this industry at least. And frankly, like, it'll make you a better painter too, even if you don't have to.
Same with storyboards. I think story is changing and you have to keep up with the times as well. Like understanding the difference between shooting a Spielberg movie in the 70s and a Spielberg movie now is way different, or between just like Spielberg and like J.J. Abrams, who is like a Spielberg fanboy. They shoot things totally different, but you can kind of see where they come from. And then also the way the stories are told now is not necessarily 3-act structure like hero style. There are obviously hero movies like Avengers and Infinity Wars, but the beats aren't. They're changing. The story beats are changing, and that's kind of like you always have to be, like you said, developing those skills. You never stop learning, and
Yeah, aware of the changes in the environment around you. You're just adapting to, yeah, to changes in the world, basically.
yep, can't be like those dinosaurs.
Yeah, it is fun though. I mean, I can see how as you get older, your priorities might change, and not everyone has time to continue taking classes or learning every new program out there. Which is why, like, you know, when you're young, you should take advantage of the time you have as much as possible. But it's good to try to keep it up, too. The most successful people I know are the ones who still draw, who didn't just decide, like, I'm too old for that shit. Like, I'm pretty happy with my skill level as is. Because essentially, you're always being chased down by the next guy.
Yeah.
So staying still is falling back.
It's like inflation. You can't just have your money sit in a bank. You gotta make that money work for you. That's a financial tip.
Don't put it under the mattress. You
What?
open up a savings account or some shit.
Yeah, go to a credit union. They'll give you better interest rates on your money.
Yeah.
Don't take these tips. I'm not a financial advisor. But go to a credit union. But don't take that tip. You know, just stick to lasagnas if you want to know how to make lasagnas. Okay, so I guess that's a long about way of saying let's talk about money a little bit. Do you mind if I borrow the keyboard for a hot second?
Here you go.
We are going to look up. So the Animation Guild tag 38 IATSE 839 surveys people or surveys its members every year, and so they survey everyone partly to see what everyone's getting paid, and also partly to, well, let me backtrack. So the way the union works is that you can only work at specific studios if you are part of the union. Like all the big studios like Sony, Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, Disney, DreamWorks, etc., have a contract with the guild, and that means if you are working on one of these studios on one of their shows, you have to be paid a specific minimum, and you are entitled these benefits like medical, pension, I think like disability, but I think under California we're covered already anyways.
Yeah.
But the union guarantees those things for you. The one thing that people always go back to is the minimums for the guild. So as a specific position, you are guaranteed this much money. You can always negotiate higher than the minimum, but if you're coming in as a new artist or something, you're guaranteed this much. So if we look at this chart here, this is it tells you the job position. So production board is actually storyboards. There's different names for storyboards. There's production boards, there's story artist, storyboard. You kind of have to figure out which one you are. Production boards usually refer to TV, but that's not always the case. And so if this is your first 6 months in the union, you get paid $51.18 an hour. That's the minimum you get paid. Like I said, you can always negotiate higher, but that is the minimum that you will start off at. After the second 6 months, it's in the contract where you get bumped up. Your rate gets bumped up to $52.34, and then after that, if you are deemed good by the team you're on or by the production, you get put into journeyman, which is kind of like an apprentice position, and you're bumped up again. The same thing happens. Well, maybe not the same thing happens, but you can see that all the different positions have a different minimum rate. So let me see if we can find designers.
Oh, like background?
Yeah, background.
I think it's at the top.
Oh, it is? Oh, my bad.
Yeah, background.
Oh.
Yeah. But I might be misunderstanding this, but my understanding has always been these first 4 are blank because the first 5 are all covered in this
Oh.
Yeah, so if it's blank next to your title, that just means that you're being grouped in under the same pay rate as because they wouldn't want to repeat first 6 months, second 6 months journey for each one of these categories.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. So yeah, that's why story person and production boards are two different positions. I think story person is more for feature, I think. I don't know.
I don't know how boards work.
It might be board driven versus script driven.
I think that's my guess, is that story person is like a board driven show where you end up sort of boarding and writing.
I need to go back and check. That was one of the problems with one of the issues that the guild needs to solve is setting the parameters of what a storyboard artist does, as well as the classifications of the storyboard artist. Emma McCloskey asks, is that per production or is it after your first full year in animation altogether? You're a journeyman forever.
Yeah, you're a journeyman forever. Like, once you've put in that time, right? That's just your rate at that point.
Is that what it? I guess so. I always thought the journeyman rate was like the apprentice position, but maybe they changed because it wouldn't make sense for it to be first 6 months, second 6.
No, journey is like the minimum once you've been doing the job for a while. Because I've never been paid under the journey minimum beyond like my first year in animation.
They should call it like a bounty hunter. Like at that point, you're in the
journey is just legit. It's just like that's your title. Like you made it. So
you're David Carradine in Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, or Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. You're
Those
Jules.
are both good. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk the earth.
You're a journeyman now, or journey woman, journey person. You know, 2019.
Yeah. Journey person.
Journey person. So up at the top, just to also clarify, so when a job application asks, Minmaze asks, so when a job application asks what salary you expect, how would you calculate that? If it's for in-house production, they will ask you your weekly rate usually. So look at the weekly thing and then base it on that. Because we are now David Carradine and Jules and Journey persons, we can command whatever rate they're willing to pay us. It doesn't have to be the minimum. These are just minimums, and the minimums are important because this is guaranteeing that people come in, get paid a certain amount. If the minimum keeps going down, then people can't command higher prices, right? Like, that is the whole point. That's why minimums are important for all the artists in the guild. Even if you're making beyond the minimum will help preserve your higher rate as time goes on. And that's why you need to look at this. If it's a little confusing, it's because the way the guild works is that... Oh shit, I wonder if we're even... Well, you can find this on the web. The way the guild works is that every 3 years we renegotiate with all the studios. And so a part of our contract is every year the rates go up to account for inflation in the economy and whatever else, right? So this is the current, I think, one after the last negotiation. This is the first year after the negotiation contract. This is the second year after the negotiation contract. And this is the third year. So by the third year, it should be a lot higher than the first year that we started negotiating with them. And so after 7/31/21, we will have a new contract that will have, again, 3 years of incrementally increasing rates. So look at your pay period. So right now it's between 8/4/19. So this column here is where you would look for your hourly rate, and this one's for your weekly rate. Do not refer to these first two columns because they are in the past. This is the current time period right here.
Yep. So basically what we're negotiating for, on top of all the extra stuff that we would like to get, is how much that rate goes up. And I think it's 3% right now, or was it lower than that?
I think it was 3%, 2%. It was like 1, and then like 1.5, and then like 3. Like it wasn't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If you're doing freelance, that's a totally different thing because storyboards is by the page, and so you kind of change that up. I don't know what the going rate for freelance is right now because I haven't done it in a while. Is background similar too, or
there's probably there might even be a freelance thing in here, but yeah, honestly, like when I do freelance, the thing is, if you do freelance, you're not you might not be getting your union hours for that because you're basically being paid separately from what the production is running off of, which basically means that you're not contributing hours to the union pool that gives you your health care. So technically, they should be paying you more for freelance hourly than they pay you for, just being in-house on a job, which is why, like, you got to make sure that you're getting what your time is worth. Because technically, like, if a show were to reach out and just hire a bunch of freelancers and not have to pay, and I mean, we have rules about how much freelance you can use on a show, but if they were using as much freelance as possible, they could get away with not paying much money into. I think each time you get a paycheck for an in-house job, union job, they have to send the union like 30 or 35% of what you're getting to cover your healthcare plan.
Yeah.
And that all goes into a massive pool that we get our health care out of. So when they're overly freelancing out a show, they're basically like trying to send as little money into that plan as possible. So that's why you want to make sure that they're not, getting away with that.
The other thing about the hour, they call them union hours, is you need, I think, like 300, or maybe, I think it's gone up like 350 to qualify for those health benefits and pension benefits, etc., etc. Like, if you don't have all those hours, then I think you get suspended, or like you have to defer for a little bit until you build those up. And 350 sounds like a lot, but if you're on a show for like a season, you'll definitely hit that mark pretty quickly. That's like 9 weeks of work. So that's like 2.5 months. If you're on a show for 2.5 months, then you've already hit your hours for those 6 months, and then I think another 300 will give you another 6 months in the bank. So you have a full year's worth of coverage, even if you aren't currently working, right? Like, your hours accumulate to a certain point. There is a cutoff. I think it's like 600 or something, but it'll cover you for a full year if you max out your hours. 400. Oh, nice. Even harder.
Sweet. Yes.
So that's like 10 weeks. That's about like 2.5 months, a little bit more.
Yeah. I guess if you're out of work, then it sucks. But if you're regularly working on union stuff, it's not very hard to hit that amount.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is the one thing you gotta keep working on union projects. There's a lot of cool non-union stuff out there, but yeah, it's worth it to prioritize union work.
Yeah. So the thing about non-union work is they don't have to pay you by these numbers. They can pay you whatever they feel like. They don't have to abide by any type of rules or regulations other than the ones by the state and the federal government. So it becomes a Wild West at that point. Like, they can pay you way under whatever.
You're negotiating for yourself. The guild can't really do anything to protect you, and on top of that, you're not getting your healthcare hours. So, yeah, if you do that for too long, you won't be covered anymore, which sucks, because our healthcare is actually pretty good.
Yeah, the thing about the IATSE and what is very different than the other guilds is that a lot of our residuals and pay goes towards our pension and healthcare. So that's why our healthcare is cheap but good. Those residuals that writers get and the residuals that maybe like directors get in the different guilds don't actually go into a pool for everyone to use. Instead, it's just individual. So at a certain point, if you're not working that much,
I didn't even know that was the amount until recently. The production is supposed to take care of it for you as long as it's a union project. They will just send that money to the union. Yeah, I didn't know how much they pay to the union for the longest time. I found that out like a couple months ago.
I knew they had to do it for the residuals, but I didn't know they were also. But that makes sense because I know in Hawaii, I think it's the same thing where you have, as like a employer, you have to pay a certain percentage towards their healthcare, which is fine. Like I think, yeah, I don't. This is a whole another topic of healthcare in America that's just like dumb.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, we're very lucky to have this set up with the union.
Yes.
And hopefully the union stays and the jobs stay.
Yes.
And we can continue to enjoy these benefits.
Don't believe anyone that says the union is bad because the union guarantees you a lot of rights that you would not have as a worker. Like unions, just a brief overview of things. Unions made that children can't work. Unions made it so that you only had to work 40 hours. Unions gave you like the ability to negotiate with these companies. They protected you. The first unions that started, the companies would literally send out hitmen to attack the union leaders. Fortunately, that doesn't happen.
Maybe.
I don't know, but unions, not just the animation union, but all unions have a very they provide a good protection for workers. So it might seem like it's a lot of money to pay the dues, but the dues actually are totally worth it. Like,
and compared to every other entertainment union, ours is dirt cheap. I
Yes.
mean, yeah, the directors union is it's just exponentially more expensive than ours, and they do more, so there's a reason for it. But yeah, our union, I mean, once you get past your initiation fee, which it was a big chunk of change at the time, especially since you're probably just getting out of school when you're doing it. I think, was it like your first paycheck or two? It was, because I think it scaled, but I don't know if it was scaling to just the year I had to pay it or the rate I was making. But it felt like I was losing like a week's pay or something.
I think it's like 2 weeks.
Maybe
pay
it was 2 weeks.
before taxes, so that's kind of a huge hit.
Yeah, but once you pay that, the quarterly dues are minuscule compared to what you get. I mean, you would have to pay $100 just to have like some symbolic health insurance.
Yeah.
So yeah, $100 once every 3 months for really good coverage is awesome. And yeah, we kind of need the union to keep our wages where they are and to hopefully continue to push them up so that we can actually afford to live in this crazy city. $4,000, that's a lot of money, yeah.
I the other thing about unions that Arthur hinted at was that it's the collective bargaining power that allows us to negotiate these rates. If it wasn't for the union, they could just the studios know how much everyone's making, so they could just undercut people. And I don't have the same resources as I don't have the ability to talk to all 4,000 people working in the industry, or the couple thousand that are still trying to break in, right? So essentially they have all the bargaining power, but unions flip that so that we have a little bit more power at the negotiation table.
And there's a very specialized, dedicated talent pool in LA for animation that you're just not going to find anywhere else. So it's important that we all stick together and that we use our power to continue to fight for our rights.
So, yeah, unions are good. Even though there's a lot of talk about like union busting and stuff, like don't fall for it. It's not. We'll all lose in the end.
Yeah. It's bad for America.
Yep. And that's why I think I don't want to get into political stuff. Anyways, did that answer your question about the wage survey and understanding how it works? Freelance is a whole different thing. I can't really help you there. But if you're working at in-house studio, refer to this chart. You can find it on the guild page. Just type in the animation guild and it should be like the first hit on Google. I think there's only one animation guild in America because this only applies to California. And I don't even think all of California. I think it applies to LA because it doesn't apply to Northern California. It certainly doesn't apply to the West Coast, all of the West Coast. It doesn't apply to the East Coast. It's only like an LA type thing, I think. So, but if you are working on a union show, like freelancing on a union show, technically they have to pay those rates, I think.
Wait, freelance timing, writer, storyboard. I don't know what I'm looking at.
This one is very different than the other ones that we've seen so far, so I had a hard time like understanding it too before.
Right, yeah. Oh, and there's separate wages for these side letter call outs with the individual studios for, I'm assuming, new media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah. When you guys get into the union, go to the union meetings, like try to be as informed as possible because everything is changing so fast now. I think there was a union meeting tonight, actually.
Oh, shit.
Well, I mean, I do it every Tuesday anyway, so I'm like, I can't. I'm here for the people.
Yeah.
The people. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, I think it's 10 o'clock. And we'll wrap it up with another joke.
Oh, goody. All right.
Like I said, make sure to follow Arthur on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. Arthur Loftis.
Tangentially.
Afro Addy asks, this is tangerine related, but would you think intro roles are less a part of the union? It's kind of intern application season right now, so I'm curious. Intro roles. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by intro roles, but there are rules regulating how many interns can be working on a show, as well as the type of work that they can be doing on the show. Like,
yeah, they can't do actual creative work. It has to be like production related, basically, like organizing, renaming files, stuff like that. Because as soon as the studios have interns in their drawing backgrounds, it's gonna be bad news.
Yeah. If you are like an intern and you're doing work, I think technically you're supposed to be paid. If you're at a union studio, you're definitely supposed to be paid, and I think you're in an apprenticeship program at that point. You're no longer considered an intern.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know how paid internships work into that because I don't know what the rules are about that.
Yeah.
Because I think there are two different things. I think being an apprentice and being a paid internship are two different roles, and I don't know the details of why they're different. And then there's like non-paid internships, which you're definitely not supposed to be doing creative artwork stuff.
Yeah.
Bunch of thanks. Thank you guys. You guys could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here, and we appreciate that.
Thanks for coming.
Give you that big thumbs up energy.
Yeah.
Up with 2 A's.
2 of them.
Way up. A says, I think interns should get paid all the time, no exception. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. School credit just... What does that even mean?
If you think about it, we're basically... It's like collegiate sports. We're like playing for the college, but not getting paid while the college gets all the benefits.
Right. Yeah. We'll cover the cost of this class you don't have to take so that you can go out and work for someone for free.
That being said, apply for all the internships. That's the best way to get to know people. That's the best way to break in. That is where you'll probably learn the most about how to do your job that you're looking for. I think schools don't necessarily teach you how to be prepared for the workforce or the work, like real work that you have to do. Internships give you a good idea about that, and they'll show you what you're lacking. Or you can come to us and we'll tell you what you're lacking as well.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's kind of where this all started, was like, I don't think anyone's really talking about this professionally, so.
That's true, yeah. I've been in a lot of classes, but few of them really get into the nitty gritty of like application. It's more about like overarching design theory stuff, which I mean is great, and you need that too. But then you figure out most of the most important shit that gets you fired in the workplace because someone's like, dude, you fucked this up pretty badly. Like, can you do it like this? So I'm happy to share that stuff because the more people know that, the easier it'll be for us to work with them. And that's what this is all about. Like, cultivating some badass artists to come out here and help us make shit.
Yeah. We need all the badass artists we can get. We need more bounty hunter person artists, people. So, Aphrodite says, "Can we talk about intern relay stuff in the future?" I might have to do more research, or I can ask someone I know that's in charge of that, because to be honest, I haven't been an intern in a long time, and like I said, the first job I had was on paper, so I imagine things have changed.
Stuff has probably changed. Yeah, I'm sure we know someone who deals with that stuff, though.
Yeah, it's Robin, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other people I know that's that. Well, there are people we could ask that might make it easier, because I don't think we're the right resource necessarily for the specific. I think there are very specific things for internships, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
Kenny asked, "Are you coming to Lightbox?" I think that's 2 weekends. Not this weekend, but the weekend.
Yeah, it's like the September 6th weekend. Well, I know you're not.
I'm not going.
I don't think I am. I guess I'll put it out on Instagram if I end up doing it, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going. There will be some representation from Titmouse there, though, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think there's some studios that are going on Lightbox, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some studios that are doing portfolio review stuff. So if you actually, you might have had to submit for that already, but yeah, I'm sure there will be something there.
Kirk's gotta be there. Kirk Swolmoto.
Swolmoto, yeah, that's what we call him.
Definitely say hi to him. I think he's actually streaming right now as well.
We should not compete with him.
Well, I mean, his is a paid class, so it's.
Oh right, yeah. So this is the good one.
Yeah, this is for the people, like I said.
Yeah, he just draws naked people. What does he know?
What a perv.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Drawing naked people is a good skill to have.
Yeah.
New personal goal: become a badass bounty hunter artist. Yes. Yep. All right, let's end with a joke, so you guys can go to sleep and what.
I don't know if I'll be able to sleep after this.
Oh, this is so good. What's orange and stings? What's orange and stings? It is macaroni and bees.
Man, these are really bad.
The story about this book is that the dad used to write jokes on his kid's lunch bag, or he write jokes and put them in the lunch bag, and so you can actually rip out all these pieces of paper and put them in, but they're all homemade technically.
Gotcha.
So they're really bad. Like this one, I think I told you before, is why should you never invite an aardvark to your family reunion?
Why?
Because it will eat all your aunts.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, those are rough. How could anyone eat their lunch after reading that?
But they kill the kids. You can flip through it. I mean.
Cool.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for coming. We'll see you guys on Friday. If you're around, we do a stream on Friday where we just hang out and talk story and play video games. You're always welcome to ask animation questions. We always bring someone on that's one of our friends from animation, so it's a lot more relaxed. Oh, I've been playing Super Hot. It's super fun.
Oh yeah, I want to see Super Hot. I've seen some stuff online, but I've never played it. So yeah, that one looked good. Very just a cool idea. Very stylish.
We'll play that one because I think it's a good streaming game, and then also, I think it's just a good streaming game to do.
It's like a murder puzzle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Finally. Jesus, what took them so long?
I mean, Clue was kind of the first murder puzzle.
Yeah, but you're just solving an already finished murder. I mean, that's boring.
You're not doing the murdering.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of puzzle that I'm looking for in my video game. Do you know who the guest is?
No, I haven't asked anyone yet. Oh, I should. Do you have anyone in mind?
I'll draw you up a list.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. Yeah, we got top tier talent. I'm sure we'll find someone good.
Oh, look at this. Come on down.
Oh, what?
What's going on?
You're in the frame now.
Uh-oh.
There he is. Kirk Shinmoto.
What do you guys do?
Oh, wait. We should change the
Wait, can they see us? Yeah. Oh, shoot.
You're in there.
What are you guys talking about?
Well, Dwoo showed me this joke book, but also.
Oh, tell him some jokes.
All right, yeah. Let's see if you get one. What covered the yellow brick road with snow?
What?
The Blizzard of Oz. I mean, they're not good.
That was actually one of the better ones.
Maybe it's the delivery. Oh, this one has a cat in it. Oh, God, I hate it. Why couldn't the cat play on the computer?
Why?
Because she ate the mouse. Don't laugh. You're playing right into his hands.
Everyone says, A says, hey Kirk. Afro says,
Hello.
Min-May says, hi Kirk.
They were probably just in your stream.
Oh, yeah. You guys tune in from class?
Yeah. We're streaming from both floors of the house.
Yeah.
Which is true, yeah.
I gotta switch to Dwoo's stream so I can see Kirk downstairs.
Don't cross the street.
Oh,
You can't escape me, Kirk. There's cameras everywhere.
Oh. How'd your stream go?
It's good. First day class.
What's the
for
class?
Analytical figure drawing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, thekirkshop.com.
Is it the Kirk? Oh, it
Kirk
is.
Shop, one word. Yeah.
Also at T
T-Hero.
T-Hero.
Is it the same on Twitter too?
I don't have a Twitter. Should I get a Twitter?
All the cool kids are on Twitter now.
What is Twitter? Wait, what's that?
Never heard of it. Is that some sort of like thing that would ruin your election process?
Damn. I mean, with the current president, no.
Yeah, what are you guys talking about?
Oh, I did like a composition one, so we're just.
Oh, what is this? This isn't composition.
Yeah, well, the composition of my paycheck.
Oh.
We were just talking about every frame a painting,
Oh, cool.
and sometimes just a line drawing. Yeah,
Yeah, those aren't paintings.
yeah, not yet.
Not with that attitude. I mean, we could talk all night about stuff. What's going on in your guys' life right now? Anything that you're really hyped about, or in terms of like things that are inspiring you right now?
Oh man, this isn't new at all, but Kang recommended some artists to me because I'm starting on this new project, and I've been really looking at this one guy who's probably just like an old school feature vis-dev dude, but it was a French name, Luc de Marche. I wish I had a book of his shit here, but I'm sure we could Google it. Luc, L-U-C, and then D-E-S. It's one word. The second name. D-M-A, March. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's too French to pronounce, but his work's awesome.
Whoa.
De Marchelier.
Whoa.
I've been trying to say that all week. Anyway, I like this stuff.
Oh, dang.
What? He'll be a Lightbox.
What?
Oh, dang.
Well, I guess people should go to Lightbox and look at this shit, because it's awesome.
Damn, man. Look at this guy.
Yeah. It's like a nice blend of, like, graphic with, you know, great lighting, you know, that stage lighting we were talking about.
That's him. He looks like someone I know. I don't know from where though. That's pretty. This reminds me of like a magic card.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tap 2. Add 1 colorless, 1 mono of any type tiered.
Or it could just
Oh,
be
yeah, this shit's...
a land. Or I guess, yeah.
It could, yeah. Just forest.
Yeah, I
Dude,
worked
this is
on
sick.
Hotel Transylvania. That shit's
Really?
so
Oh, okay.
good. Jesus. God.
Oh, there you go. Hotel
my-
Transylvania.
Oh my god.
Nah, it does have like that old school Disney style, which
Yeah.
you don't see very much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a City of Brass. Tap. add
Oh
1
yeah,
color of one.
totally. Port of... God, what's that other one? Just like
Whoa.
holy cow.
Dang, she's yoked. I mean, the bull.
Oh wow, this is all good stuff. Maybe I'll check this guy out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good shit.
Maybe I will check him out as well.
Yes. Cool people will check out this artist.
Whoa, space castles. What have you been inspired by recently, Kirk?
I don't know. I don't know. What have I been looking at recently?
It doesn't have to be like artists. It can be anything. Like,
Artists?
It doesn't have to be artists.
Oh, I gotta pick an artist? I don't know, man.
Oh, this one's cool too.
I wish it was. I hated how Google changed up their algorithm for this stuff.
Yeah, it's just...
Oh, well, I'm working on Eastwood's sculpt. You guys should look up Eastwood.
Oh,
Eastwood
my
Wong.
god, he's another
Yeah.
great artist.
So I'm doing a resin kit for him. We're gonna show it off at Lightbox.
Oh.
So I've been working on that.
I heard you might be at Lightbox.
Oh yes, I will be at Lightbox. I have no idea what
Eastwood
table
Wall.
I am at right now.
Images?
I guess.
Oh, Tumblr?
I was hoping to find his Instagram because he has a lot of his Instagram stuff on there
Yeah.
too.
So I'm doing a sculpt of Eden.
This character, right? Maybe not
well,
that
yeah.
one. One of these.
Well, I
No.
think this is what like her normal outfit.
Oh my.
Goodness.
Whoa. Yeah, Eastwood used to work at Pixar, I think, right?
Oh, is it Pixar? I'm not sure. I know he's over at
Chromosphere?
yeah, is that Kevin Dart's studio?
Yeah.
So he just actually they put out a pilot or they did a little trailer for a pitch, I guess. I think it's online.
Oh, really?
You can see it.
What's it called?
Eden. Look up.
Oh, wait, just go back to Eastwood Wong Animation. I
Oh,
saw
yeah.
something for Eden in the...
Oh, there you
Oh
go.
yeah, there you go. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, God. Wait, maybe I shouldn't. I don't have the rights to show this stuff on. So, you guys definitely check it out. Just type in Eastwood Wong Animation. It's like the first thing that comes up.
Oh, in and out.
In and out? What? Whoa, this looks good. I wonder if he did all the... I heard Eugene worked on this too a little bit.
Oh, did he? I don't know.
He helped him with a little bit of the storyboards.
Cool.
It looks
Oh, in
it
and
looks
out.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, man, that hamburger
If
looks
they
real good.
if they can Oh yeah, just play that shot. That shot looks really cool.
Whoa. Whoa, hold it. Slow it down. Whoa. There's a pan up.
I think that was the first thing he showed me. Was
What did he do that in? Was that After Effects?
I don't know.
One of my friends is doing motion graphics for for Blur or Buck. He was doing it for Buck, and he said After Effects is really good now for animation, and he had done the short all through. Let me see if I can find it. And I was just like, what? How did you do that?
Oh,
Is he doing like traditional animation?
It looks
Well,
traditional.
I think he showed me this actually.
yeah. Is this like the Fireflies or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
He said it was all After Effects. I'm just like, what? That's bullshit.
I hope you slapped him across the face, because that is crazy talk.
No.
He's dead now.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Well, that's an image from it, right?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Johnson here. I hope it shows up. Whoa. Oh, shit.
Oh, no.
Stupid website. Anyways, maybe another time we'll look at.
Yeah.
Supposedly, animation's really good now on it. So I'm like, oh, fuck, I gotta try that out later on. Yeah, I don't know how he did this in After Effects. Like, I don't know how he rotated shapes to match it. I'm just like, crazy.
The
Futures
mystery of
now.
the universe.
Yeah. Guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
Never again. So you're working on Sculpt?
Yeah. Well, I already sculpted it. And I cast it in resin, so I'm painting the resin kit right now.
Oh shit.
Putting it together. Yeah.
How many are you selling?
I'm gonna try to have maybe 10 kits there if I can.
You're hand painting all of them?
Oh no, I'm not gonna hand paint all of them.
Just the
Yeah.
demo.
Just one to display.
Display one.
Possibly another one, but we'll see. Yeah. I don't know what else I'm gonna have there, but that's gonna be there. So
You should do chicken drawings of people.
chicken drawings.
Yeah, you should try that.
I know a guy.
Some sort of chicken man.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't be too chicken to do those drawings.
A man can dream.
Yeah.
What else is going? Have you played Super Hot before? The video game?
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, I haven't played it, but I have seen it.
We
The shooting one, right?
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
play it this Friday.
Oh shoot.
10.
Yeah.
Shooting.
I hear Friday's gonna be hot.
Super hot?
Super.
This just in.
Super.
I bet they'd want to watch Kirk play BattleTech.
Oh man, yeah, that's another thing I've been doing. I started playing BattleTech.
What is Battletech for the people that don't know?
It is
Explain your old man thing to
Giant-
these people.
giant mech strategy game. Originally a tabletop game, but they did. When did that come out? When was the Kickstarter? They did a Kickstarter for it.
I was still on Voltron when it finally came out.
Oh,
this
so
one, Jesus.
Oh, you have to go to the
maybe it was a few years
and then
ago
go
it came out.
a few years ago. So it's a video game?
Yeah, it's pretty good. A lot of cool robots and stuff.
Can you build your own? Is it like Armor Core, or is it more like?
You can't really build them from the ground up, but you can just load them out differently. And yeah, it's like turn-based strategy. So like Final Fantasy Tactics or Front Mission. If you guys have played Front Mission.
Oh yeah, Front Mission.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. I've heard of it.
I mean, oh yeah, yeah, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been recovering from not working, or from working, so to not working.
Wait, did you finish at Tim House or?
Yeah, I finished at Tim House. So if you guys want to know, I was on Lower Decks. They did announce it at Comic-Con, so.
Oh yeah. I worked on the logo.
Oh, did you do the logo?
Yeah,
Oh,
or
shit.
I helped Antonio finish the logo.
Oh, okay.
Wait, you finished? That show's done already?
Well, it's not done,
No,
but
Oh, okay.
Just the logo.
yeah, the logo's
What?
done. Yeah, Arthur helped finish it.
Yeah.
The whole show. Him and Antonia.
Yeah, pretty easy actually. Just a couple letters.
But no, it's still in development right now. So, or I guess it might just be finishing development. Who knows? I don't know. But no, that show seems pretty fun. You guys should check it out. The writing's actually pretty good. If you guys are Star Trek fans, a lot of the humor, I think you have to have watched Star Trek to get it, which I was pleasantly surprised at.
So it's legitimately for the fans. It's not just a cheap cash-in.
Yeah, they actually know about Star Trek. So, it's good. Yeah.
That's the one with the laser swords, right?
Oh man, let's talk about that.
Yeah, laser swords.
God, I can't wait to see someone get scissored in half with those laser scissors.
Have you seen Star Trek before?
Oh wait, click up here and see if anyone comments. Got work soon. Thanks for the stream, guys. See you guys next time. See you, Happy Wally.
See you, Wally.
Have a good time at work.
See you, Wally.
Afro says that's actually super cool. I'm not sure if he's referring to the BattleTech or Star Trek.
Yeah, who knows?
Maybe both.
Yeah, it's all super cool.
Yeah, laser scissors.
Yeah, that's cool. How many people are in this stream?
14?
Oh, dang, that's a lot.
They came here to hear you talk about Star Trek.
Tell us more.
No. Wait, Star Trek or the other one? Star Battles?
Yeah,
What
I'll
was it
settle
called?
for anything. Yeah.
Star Tech.
Star Tech.
Actually, at work, a couple of my coworkers are all watching. Well, two of them are watching Star Trek. One's watching from the beginning, and then one's watching it from Deep Space Nine.
It'll remain a
Deep
mystery.
Space Nine is super good.
That's what people tell me.
Yeah.
Some other Star Trek. Other Star Trek fans tell me it's very out of character for the show in the first couple of episodes, and so not a whole lot of people like it, but it grows on you, and it's actually pretty good.
Well, you see,
Is it as good as Babylon 5?
oh.
Yeah, that'll get it.
So, have you guys heard the story about Babylon 5? Oh no, I can't talk about this right now. Anyway, the thing I appreciate about a Star Trek is if you watch The Next Generation, season 2, it's still a little rocky, but the thing is, they only fire their weapons like maybe 3 times in the whole season.
Really? Next Generation?
Yeah. The first time is...
You remember?
Yeah, I watched it kind of recently because I've been watching through it again.
I'm like, that's pretty
But,
crazy.
But the first time is to shoot this holographic thing in this kind of like giant maze they were trapped in. And the second time was to destroy a ship that was contaminated with a disease. So they weren't actually fighting anyone. Like, there's no like space battles really. I mean, that kind of does happen when the Borg.
Wait, in what?
But
In TNG?
In TNG, yeah.
No laser scissors.
But like, but I don't know. That's what I appreciate about Star Trek. That's kind of been lost. That it's not really about the space battles or the action. So,
How'd you feel about the first J.J. Abrams film when it came out?
enjoyed it as like a fun movie. But
Right.
Like, it's not really Star Trek. So
They turned it into Star Wars,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean it wasn't entertaining.
yeah. It was still entertaining.
Just separate.
Yeah. But you guys should go check out TNG because there's some really good writing and really interesting concepts and stories in there.
Yeah, we were actually watching a bunch of it at my last job.
Oh, yeah.
Because we had a projector up that we
Oh,
could
yeah,
all
that's
see.
right.
Yeah, so we would just leave TNG on all day. It was pretty good.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kenny asks, "Are you going to be signing up for Disney Plus?"
Will you submit to the mouse?
Oh man, Disney Plus. Are you guys gonna do that?
How much? It's cheaper than
It's usually like,
Netflix. It's
what,
like $6 or
$7,
something.
like,
$7.
yeah, I don't know.
I saw the stuff on it that's coming out. I'm like, this looks actually pretty good.
I mean, I do want to watch The Mandalorian.
I want to watch
'Cause that looks
Mandalorian.
cool.
That's probably the only thing I
Yeah.
care about.
And episodes are only coming out weekly.
Oh, really?
They're not doing a full drop, so it's every week a new episode comes out. So
Okay, I already like that more.
we might have to do a podcast.
Well, the thing is, I kind of miss the weekly screenings of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And nothing else Netflix is making. Well, Netflix just doesn't do that. So it's like, okay, I guess I'll just binge watch these in my room by myself. And when that's the case, it's just like, I'll just get to it when I get to it then. Because everyone is on their own timeline with that. Some people watch it the first weekend. Some people watch it like over the course of a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm just not interested in trying to keep up with it. Whereas if it's every week, it's so easy to fit it in.
Yeah, you just make like an hour to like
Yeah, I can
sit
do
down
that.
and people can hang out.
And you look forward to it week after week instead of just being like, oh shit, this thing's out. I gotta watch it all right now. It's my weekend.
And then, okay, now what do I do?
I guess I just die.
Yeah.
I am interested in hearing Mike's take on it. Just because Mike is kind of the Star Wars guy.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see, like, he's like, at this moment in minute 3, you'll see that they refer to different. Like, oh, great. Awesome. I need this. I need the bibliography backstory about everyone.
Oh, Netflix tried doing it and it didn't work out.
Oh,
I wonder if it needs to be almost like its own branding or something, just so that you realize that, hey, we're doing it like old school TV style, where you.
What a novel idea.
Yeah, that's crazy.
A says they prefer that rather than binge watching. I agree. I don't think everything needs to be weekly, but I think some things should be. Like, maybe their top tier show should be like weekly, but like smaller things like Friends or whatever, so I'm like, do you really need to see that weekly? Like, or even Seinfeld, I'd be like, do I need to see that weekly? I could just binge watch.
Well, I mean, those have been out already.
But I mean, like shows of that type.
Oh.
Like sitcoms.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Even some anime shows, I'm like, where it's just like the monster of the week, where it's not necessarily huge overarching story. You're just like.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is, they release like one season, and then you gotta wait like a year or something for it to come out. But if they just do it weekly, then you're kind of entertained that whole time. Well, I guess they wouldn't know if they were gonna do another season, huh? If they're waiting for like the ratings to come in and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it would have to be like a smash hit.
I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows?
A says Netflix should go back to doing that, especially when they do anime. I'm on the fence about anime because I think
that's how Crunchyroll does it, right? They just air it as the episodes come out overseas, so you're watching it on a weekly basis, just like they are. I like it. I mean, yeah, I like having something to look forward to. And frankly, I'm not going to set aside 8 hours in a day to watch a whole series anyway, so I kind of like that it's already parsed out for me. But
that's a good point.
I don't watch as much TV as I used to begin with, so I might be in the minority.
I guess at our age, we have less free time than we would like.
Yeah, that might be part of it too. Maybe Netflix isn't even for us.
I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, whatever, old man.
Yeah, guess I'll go back to watching my Seinfeld episodes.
You and your first generation Star Trek.
Yep.
Not the next generation.
Yeah.
A says it's kind of weird that Netflix Japan does it weekly, but we have to wait. I think it's a cultural thing because unlike here, they also have a lot of weekly things. Like mangas come out weekly, shows come out weekly. I think it's just different culture. I think they know what plays to their audiences and what doesn't.
I mean, it used to be weekly here, right? And then we just opened up the floodgates, and it was like, oh shit, yeah, I could eat that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe I
Plug
ate
it
the
into
whole
my
thing.
vein.
Yeah.
I guess like on an animation side, that's been good for the industry because it means that more shows are getting greenlit faster and more more seasons at one time.
Right, but then sometimes a season drops and it just fizzles immediately, and you're like, God, I spent so long working on that, and like it was just a flash in the pan. Like, yeah, when Voltron seasons dropped, it was like the shit for 3 days, and then it's over. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
which, you know, it's not a big deal. The show's still good. We still enjoyed making it, but it is kind of like, oh man, I was looking forward to like getting to talk to people about it as it comes out, and it's just like, no, it's gone.
Yeah.
You should do a Voltron dub over where you and the other people on Voltron do director's commentary over episodes.
Actually, I think they did that.
I mean, I know they did it for the podcast, but I mean, like a sit down, get like a legitimate like in this shot I spent. This
Oh
many
yeah,
weeks,"
that would be cool.
You can do the Arnold.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly.
Yeah, I can't
Oh, yeah.
believe this. Yeah. Is that like a snake?
I've thought about doing that for other shows I've worked on. I'm just like, I just don't have enough to say about it.
You want to do it for Turbo?
Oh yeah.
Let's do it for Turbo.
Nah, I work at Titmouse. I don't think I can talk about Turbo anymore.
I would love to do it for like Motor City or
Oh,
something.
yeah,
That
Motor
would be
City.
great,
We should bring back Motor City.
but no one would watch it.
How could you watch it?
Oh yeah,
Disney
right.
Plus?
Is it on there?
I don't know.
That would be very surprising.
Hmm.
I don't see why they wouldn't, but
It's still on the iTunes store.
Oh,
I should
yeah?
buy it. I really should buy it.
Man, why do they?
Lynn bought it.
Why do they just bury it like that? It doesn't make any sense. Ugh, Motor City. Oh wow.
A says it's like the last episode matters the most because that's what everyone remembers.
Hmm.
Yep.
That's true.
Like that other show, what? Dragon Lady gets mad.
Oh yeah, Dragon Lady gets mad. Season 8 gets mad. And now.
Dragonheart.
Yeah.
Without Sean Connery.
Oh man, yeah, that show.
Yeah, nobody remembers the beginning. They
Yeah,
just remember when the Dragon Lady gets mad.
that's true. That was the best part.
Oh.
Boy, I hope she gets mad.
This is fun. We should do this more often.
Are you gonna be on Friday night game, Paul?
Yeah, maybe you'll be
What?
the guest.
Oh.
Have you ever guested on Friday night game stream with Dwoo time?
No, I don't think so. Usually I'm like teaching or something Fridays.
Oh, you teach Fridays.
Well, now I don't. But I was running workshop Friday nights,
Well, you could be the guest.
so I never.
You do live here.
Yeah, we start at 9:30. We talk just like this for an hour, and then we do another hour of video games. And
I mean, I've popped in once in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
but we want you to be the entree.
The
Yeah.
entree. Oh.
The main course.
Oh goodness.
We can get all your hot takes.
Sure.
Is
Super
Star
hot
Wars
takes.
Episode 9 gonna be good? Find out on Friday.
Kirk has the inside
Oh my
track.
God.
Yeah, Kirk knows everything that happens.
No, I
and
don't.
you can see the excitement on his face.
Mm.
Yeah. They're gonna go back in time and clone who?
Oh man.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Sure. Whatever.
Sounds good.
Maybe. This week. Whenever. You can find me. You know where I
Yeah.
live.
That's
Well,
true.
you have to let me know now because I have to start asking. I'm usually really bad about asking people.
Oh.
So if you're not gonna do it this Friday, I need to find someone for Friday.
Yeah, I can't do this. I think the next 2 weeks I'm gonna be busy.
Okay.
I'm getting ready for Lightbox. I'm trying to finish stuff up.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Maybe we could get this French guy. He seems pretty good at drawing.
Maybe you could get I was gonna say Mark Taihei, but I think he's leaving for Japan soon.
What? He's going to Japan.
Oh wait, is he ending? Yeah, I don't think he's.
Wait, where's Mark right now? Is he at Titmouse?
He was on Lower Decks with me, but I think he's only there to the end of this month or something. But he could do magic on stream.
Oh!
That's a good idea.
Okay, I'll reach out to Mark. Tell Mark, hey Mark, you want to play some Super Hot?
Magic Mark.
Do you like
Mark.
living room magic?
Yeah.
Pick a sofa.
That's so good. He's like, look under your shirt. It's like a shoe. It's like a cushion. Sofa cushion.
Yeah.
Is that your stain? Oh, it's so good.
I can't wait for Magic Mark.
Magic Mark.
You guys don't know Mark Taihei, but he's a member of the Magic Castle.
Yeah, he's a legitimate performing member of the Magic Castle, and he's also a background designer, all-around accomplished art center graduate,
I don't
master
know, he didn't
painter.
graduate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he just left.
Oh damn, even better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was too good
He's
for
an art
it.
center dropout.
Yeah, what a loser!
Yeah.
All he could do is magic tricks. Jeez, can't wait to see him on Friday.
You should get a. What about William? William New?
Oh yeah, William
That'd be
would be
fun.
fun. He has all kinds of hot takes.
Yeah. Well, you could do it like introduce him to something he's never seen before.
Yeah.
That is true.
I think that's always fun.
Yeah, William is also a background badass. We got all kinds of amazing artists.
Background bounty hunters.
Yeah.
The BHBGs.
You should do a ghost story one for October.
Well,
People could tell ghost stories.
dude, we should set up so that we can have a fire outside. Like a barbecue. Like, we'll just have the computer inside, we'll point it out the door. It'll be outside street. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can come on stream if you want, or just shoot in.
No, I'm waiting for Arthur for dinner.
No, go for it.
Sorry. Oh my god, it's 10:45.
Oh man.
Well, we shot the shit. Should we?
Is it
Yeah,
dead?
we'll wrap it up.
Is
We'll wrap it up with
is
another
the shit-
joke.
Is the
Here,
shit
you can
dead?
tell Arthur a joke now.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Let's
right.
see.
Give me a good one.
Wait, where do you?
It's
Oh,
You read it on the right and then flip it over for the.
like a book.
why is a calendar never lonely?
Why?
Because it has a different date every day.
That's too good.
I mean, it's a little better than the others,
It's so
but
good.
it's still.
They're never bad.
Man, this is a good book.
That has nothing to do with lunch.
No, it's because he put the jokes in the lunch bag.
So this could be about anything.
Oh yeah. Tell him another one. Give him
Yeah.
the 1-2.
Yeah.
Wait, I just read a good one. Well, it was why did the piglets fall asleep in school?
Why?
Because their teacher was a real bore. And there's a picture of a bull.
Oh my god. I choose you. Alright, I've had enough.
Alright.
On that note,
Say bye, Kirk.
goodbye, guys.
Say bye, Arthur.
Goodbye, Arthur.
That's a good Alright, we'll see you again. Thank you guys for stopping by. I really appreciate it. We'll see you on Friday. Maybe we'll convince Kirk to come on and Mark here or William, but we'll have someone on as usual. Playing super hot.
Yeah, can't wait.
You should play it in VR. I have PSVR.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
Because I could just see the screen, and you could have a camera on whoever's in the VR.
Does it work with the Switch?
What's on the PS4? Well, I could get it on PS4.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Anyways, thanks for coming out, guys.
See you guys.
We'll talk to you later.
Good night.
Good night.